Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is some flowers bloom in darkness in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 6, Daughter of Demons. They didn't talk in the morning. Descending the stairs that first day, Sakura was tense. Body thrumming with tension as though expecting hidden shuriken at any moment. Instead, she was greeted pleasantly and sat down to breakfast. By mid-morning the tension of last night had faded. It still existed, but like every other issue within her family, all three of them feigned ignorance. It had been like that as far back as Sakura could remember. Difficult conversations and emotions simply thrown from the house. Never resolved. Left only to fester in the dark outside as life moved on. Sometimes when Sakura felt like screaming from frustration, she could hear them clawing and shrieking at the windows with poison hands. Why won't you speak, Toyu-san? Why is Kao-san so cruel? Why is Sakura so stubborn? Why can't we all just agree? Inevitably, a day will come when the glass shatters. The Harano family was not perfect. That was not, and had never been the issue. No, it was because they pretended to be. Putting away the dishes, Sakura chatted with her mother. Mabuki smiling and dodging a playful flick of the dish towel. Kaizushi made an offhand comment that sent all three of them into hysterics. Sakura loved her family truly, she did. But they love a very small part of me, and I'm tired of hiding everything else. Sakura hated to disturb the peace. And so, like every other time, she said nothing. Sakura and her parents fell easily back into the same routine. The only difference being she was gone training most of the day, coming home exhausted and covered in sweat and light bruises every evening. Dinner was a quiet affair. The scent of fresh rice and sauces tickling her nose as Sakura quizzed them about business. The topic of her future career deftly avoided. A landmine they tiptoed around. Soon the table would be cleared and Sakura would excuse herself to her room. Closing the door with a soft snick and leaning back against it. The light from her window drawing out elongated shadows. Long brush strokes of darkness painted onto walls and floor. Only here, in this small part of the house, could she properly relax. Drop the polite smile and prim posture. Rub aching muscles and let out unladylike groans. Flopping onto the bed, Sakura reached for the nearest book. Paper rustling like autumn leaves as she peeled it open. A Beginner's Guide, Reptiles Species of the Land of Fire. Scanning the text, she stopped at an illustration of a squat, ugly snake. Fat broad head colored light beige, spikes surrounding its eyes and chin. River mud snake, the title stated. Are you perhaps one of these? Sakura asked teasingly, her lean body stretched across the bed as she held the scroll up to the roof. I remember seeing some brown in those scales. She hadn't, of course. Not that she would tell Kawa his coloration was beautiful. A displeased hiss. Careful, child. I can still bite you. Sakura grinned. Ah, no need to be so cold-blooded. I think mud snakes are perfectly fine. His furious expression flashed in her mind's eye. Eyes narrowed to slits and mouth bared, displaying lethal, pure white fangs and a gaping maw. Such indignant fury at her question. And I'm the child? Sakura burst out laughing. Okay, you're a beautiful river snake. No mud in sight. And don't you forget it. He added, tail flicking in undisguised pleasure. Sakura snorted. What an awfully vain reptile. Falling asleep that night, Sakura resigned herself to another week of tiptoeing around her house. Mabuki had not so subtly bought back the dresses her daughter had donated, leaving them in a neat pile directly atop Sakura's collection of weapons. The very same week, Kaizushi had began to instruct her on how to manage the finances of the business. Booming voice shouting approval at every correct calculation. Sakura's impromptu haircut had been fixed at a professional salon. Rough pink strands smoothed back into order. It wasn't as though her parents abused her. They loved her as fiercely as Sakura loved them. At least that's what was telling herself into the quiet night of her room. They only want the best for me. Or do they want the best for themselves? They gave birth and cared for me. I owe them. The snake's tongue flickered. You owe them nothing. Biting her lip, Sakura considered his words. I don't know what to do, Kawa. You do. It is just not an easy choice to make. Too tired to debate anymore, Sakura drifted to sleep. Pandemonium. Sakura could only register chaos. There were shadowed figures above her and something was screaming. Such awful, awful screaming. The sound sprinting around her room like a feral cat. Wild and dangerous and terrifying. Yanked from dreams, Sakura lashed out wildly. Trying to escape from everything at once. Falling from the bed, she thrashed in blind panic. Tangling in blankets in a desperate effort to escape from the unknown threat. Airway temporarily obstructed as a sheet wrapped around her throat. Sakura's teeth clicked together. And the screaming stopped. Relieved, she lay panting on the floor. Limbs shaking as though she'd run for miles, a thin layer of perspiration coating her skin. Something warm was coating her right hand. The rich, metallic smell reaching her sensitive nose. Blood. Whose was it? Certainly not hers, as a quick skin revealed no injuries other than a burning in her throat. Almost as though I've been screaming. That blood-curdling sound was her own voice distorted by fear. Rubbing her eyes, Sakura opened them. Wincing at the bright light. Is it morning already? I must have had a bad dream. Untangling the blankets, she stood on shaking legs. The light hurt her eyes. Too bright for so early. No. Sakura realized in growing horror. It's still night. Which means that someone else is here as well. Her gaze cast wildly around the room only to land on her parents, the terrified forms of her parents. Blood streamed from Kaizushi's nose. Mabuki's arm displayed a row of fresh scratches. The exact size of Sakura's fingernails. Okami, what have I done? Kaa-san. Tdo-san. Sakura swallowed nervously. I am so sorry. I had a bad dream and got frightened. Neither said anything. Watching their daughter with trepidation. The couple had assumed a defensive stance. Arms clasped together and bodies tilted protectively towards the other as they huddled as far away as possible from Sakura. As fearing attack. The sight of Sakura's own parents, cowering away in terror from their only child, was an image she would take to the grave. The room fell silent. Echoes of pained screams haunting the air. The scent of blood so thick it was all but suffocating. Sakura's soft yet rapid breaths were as constant as raindrops, punctuating the silence as she fought back panic. She took a tentative step forward. Stop. Mabuki barked out the word and Sakura froze. Kaa-san. The woman flinched. Don't you dare call me that. I'll ask this only once. Shrugging aside her husband's grip, Mabuki marched over. Looming threateningly over Sakura and stabbing an accusing finger towards her face. Kaa-san's expression had twisted in a way Sakura had never seen. Feral, unhinged fury written into curling lips and blazing green eyes. What have you done with my daughter? Sakura opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. A performer with no voice asked to sing for the stage. The eyes of the crowd stifling her to silence. I am right here. Mabuki grabbed a kunao from her belt. Raising it overhead fast enough that Sakura shrieked. Instinctively covering her head and cowering away. Without looking, Mabuki threw the weapon backwards. The blade embedding itself into the wardrobe with a dull thunk. Wood chips skittering across the floor. It was strong enough to trigger the pressure mechanism, causing the door to swing outward. The mirror attached to the interior coruscating artificial lights. It stopped opposite Sakura. And, at the sight of her own reflection, everything made sense. She had fangs. Vicious, wickedly sharp fangs where normal human canines used to be. Sakura's new canines reminded her of Kibis. That slightest hint of something not quite human whenever he laughed. Pointed canines flashing in the sun, symbolizing his Inyazuka heritage. For Kiba, it was something to be proud of. Something his parents accepted because, after all, he was exactly like them. For Sakura it was something to hide. A horrifying mistake that elicited nothing but disgust. I can explain. Raising her hands in a placating gesture, Sakura tried her utmost to look harmless. Opening her mouth had been the wrong decision. Serving only to accentuate her monstrous appearance, pointed, snake-like teeth and Oh fuck. Her eyes. The one link that unequivocally declared her Mabuki's daughter, that marked her as a Harino, had shifted into something entirely different. Her parents were momentarily forgotten as Sakura walked to the mirror. Transfixed by the face looking back. The color of her eyes had altered into two subtly different tones. A lighter, colder green surrounding the pupil in a small circle before seamlessly blending into a darker emerald hue along the outer edges of the iris. Were that the only thing changed, Sakura could have looked past it. My, what pretty eyes you have. They were mirror images to Kawa's. Elliptical slits that bore no resemblance at all to a human gaze. Gingerly touching her face. Sakura recalled the time she had flipped through a book detailing Konoha's worst criminals. An entire 20 pages devoted to the villainous exploits of Sunin Orochimaru. His profile sketch had stared at Sakura with a small, self-satisfied smirk. The Sunin was known for his snake summons, beings powerful enough to reduce entire villages to rubble. All that power had bled through to his face. Which looked less and less human the more recent the bingo book. It was his eyes she thought of now. That snake-like gaze. Slitted pupils and sharp fangs that were noticeable at every angle. Just like her. Turning away from the mirror, Sakura swallowed shakily. I am sorry. She took a tentative step towards her parents. The couple watching her warily from their place against the far wall. Weapons readied for attack. Her heart squeezed painfully at the sight. Sakura wanted nothing more than to sink into their embrace. Desperately she reached out a hand. Hoping against everything someone would take it. Comfort her just as they did whenever she had a bad dream. Kaizashi would her small palm up to his cheek and smile as Mabuki hummed soft lullabies. Even after she had injured them, Sakura liked to think they would have reached for her. Taken her hand. If only it weren't covered in blood. The red liquid had long since dried, yet Sakura imagined she could still feel it dripping from her fingertips. A crimson wave of violence. Soaking the floorboards and dripping down the walls. The reality of what it meant to be shinobi. The blood bonds of her family were steadily breaking apart. Sakura couldn't help but blame herself, if only she wasn't such a monster. Though the word was uttered quietly, it forced itself inside Sakura's head. Spinning around and around like a broken record. Monster, 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 monster. Sakura's hands clamped around her head. The word burning a hole into her brain. Why did such a lie it hurt so much? You're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. Soon she was screaming the words aloud. Panic, hurt and loss tearing apart her insides. Mabuki and Kaizashi had retreated to the open doorway. Both assuming defensive stances with Kunao at the ready. As Sakura looked at their faces, each took another step backwards. Stop, please. The words were strangled. Tears streaming down her face to blur her vision at the corners. Didonti Gokaa-san. Tio-yu-san. Sakura collapsed to the floor hard enough to bruise. Form tiny and pathetic as sobs racked her body. I'm your daughter. A shuddering breath. When had their expressions turned so cold? I'm still your daughter, aren't I? For a second they hesitated. Glancing at each other in soundless torment. Conflicted emotions evident as they glanced towards anything but their only child. She allowed herself to feel hope when Mabuki's arm twitched, loosening around the kunao as though about to cast it aside. Kaizashi leaning against her shoulder as though in support. Sakura offered up a tentative smile. One which dissolved a second layer as her parents tensed. Adopting the tones and stances they often used with difficult customers. Unfeeling and harsh. Entirely unattached to the pleas of a stranger. Is that all I am now? You are no child of ours. Mabuki squared her shoulders. Mimicking her actions, Kaizashi turned his face away from his daughter. Resolutely ignoring Sakura's silent pleadings in favor of supporting his wife. Just like always. The Harinos do not raise monsters. We expect you gone by morning. With that her family shattered. 12 years of love destroyed in 12 words. Sakura's parents turning their backs to her as they slipped away. It was almost comical, how quietly they shut the door. As though a soft rejection would make it hurt less. I wonder who the real monsters are. Chapter 7, Team of Orphans. Sakura packed her bag with methodical detachment. The necessary items scattered across the floor like fallen leaves. It's just like a mission, Sakura told herself grimly. Movements faltering only slightly as she placed everything carefully inside. Underwear, socks, pants, shorts, shirts, jackets. Kunao, shuriken, senbon. Scrolls, books, medical supplies. The last of her ration bars just managed to squeeze in at the top. Sakura's pack, the same one she took on every mission, now filled to bursting. She couldn't risk taking more than one bag. Unsure what accommodation her meager savings would be able to secure and unwilling to be over-encumbered by luggage. Checking and rechecking for the 5th time that everything was ready, Sakura finally stood. The pack heavy on her shoulders in a way that had nothing to do with weight. Her room looked so empty, foreign and unwelcoming. The bed was neatly made, all the clothes Sakura couldn't take folded away. The desk all but sparkling. No scraps or paper or pencil smudges to be seen. Her collection of shoujo manga thrown in the bin. More than anything, the room resembled a spare bedroom. A place for guests to spend the night. Every hint of her had been scrubbed away. It's almost like I never lived here, Sakura had cried for hours after her parents left. The gaping hole where her family had once been an insatiable abyss. She had grieved for her old life. Torn at her hair and skin until it bled. Cursing all Rognin and her own weakness. Now, she felt numb. Buried beneath icy walls of resignation, she could only move forward. Accepting of the knowledge she was now entirely alone. Not entirely. You don't count. Whatever sick transformation had possessed her last night was gone in the morning. Fangs reverted back to normal human teeth. And her eyes, though bloodshot from crying, were devoid of all reptile traits. Not that it made a difference. The damage was done. Sakura could see it in the way her parents shied away from her as she entered the living room, keeping a healthy distance from their daughter as though she had some contagious disease. Sakura paused, facing across a few meters of space that might as well be a canyon. Her hands clenching tighter around the straps of her pack. Kaizashi's nose was heavily bandaged whilst Mabuki sported a black eye. Both regarded her in silence. Grief was evident in pinched expressions and tired eyes, but not nearly enough for what they have done. Sakura was the first to speak. Unwilling to linger in a place that was no longer home. I'll be leaving now. Her voice sounded brittle enough to snap. Honeycomb left in the oven too long. Sweetness burned away. Thank you for everything, Kaizashi-san, Mabuki-san. Bowing deeply as a mark of respect, Sakura stared at the floor, trying to memorize the faint lines in the wood and commit the scent of home to memory. Straightening, she waited several heartbeats, hoping they would say something, anything. Mabuki turned her head away. Kaizashi followed suit. Neither made to stop her as Sakura marched to the door, face burning with hurt and shame. How dare you? She wanted to scream at them. How can you abandon me? Sakura's hand closed around the doorknob, the metal cool against her fevered skin. It opened easily. Her feet stopped at the threshold, the serpent inside her coiling and thrashing. Behind her was family and comfort. Ahead lay Konoha and all its dark secrets. If Amaki had never found me, would I be in this position? If all human love is like this, Amaki was a blessing. Who would have thought? Sakura said darkly, looking over her shoulder at the Haranos with an odious gaze. That a parent's love for their child could be so fragile. She bared her teeth, wishing those fangs would re-emerge. That Sakura looked every bit as monstrous as she felt. Her hand tightening on the doorknob before wrenching it open, slamming it shut behind her hard enough to rattle the house. The day was bright and sunny as she stepped outside, a cheerful contrast to the twisting grayness inside her mind. The sweet scents of blooming honeysuckle and bush clover seemed determined to erase the bitterness of the past day. Garden plants brushed against her thighs as Sakura strode to the gate. Small ferns and foliage weeping dew, as though mourning her departure. Unlike the front door, the gate she closed carefully, mindful of the small vines that had begun to grow along the wood. A product of months of neglect, her parents rarely home long enough to garden. too busy to cut back the weeds that had begun to sprout, pushing through the dark earth like bones through skin. Sakura had spent much of her childhood alone in the very house she was leaving. Which, looking back on it, was perhaps why she had clung so desperately to Ino and the idea of Sasuke. There was an odd sense of kinship in being just another fangirl, even if they rarely spoke to one another. Every day at the academy Sakura could get lost in the crowd, forgetting just for a few moments that home was nothing but a silent house. Her steps didn't falter as the Harano residence disappeared. Sakura's eyes clear of tears, even if all she had in the world was a single travel pack, and a tag-along soul. I resent that. Ignoring him, Sakura set her gaze on the road ahead. What do you mean it's 500 ryo a month? Sakura slammed her hand down on the documents. The photographs of an old, battered-looking apartment clipped to the front. The desk clerk cringed, looking decidedly uncomfortable at the short, pink-haired girl currently screaming obscenities. There is no way in the 9 villages I can afford that. And nobody should be paying so much for such a rat's nest. Growling in frustration, Sakura reached for a new stack, scanning the monthly rent cost of each apartment before moving on to the next. She had calculated that, with her savings from the loathsome D-rank missions and the A-rank pay wave had yielded, Sakura would be able to secure a modest apartment for at least the next few months. Or so she had calculated. Why is everything so fucking expensive? The civilian woman's expression soured and, had Sakura not had a decidedly shitty week, she may have felt more than a pinch of guilt. As it were, she simply waited impatiently as the woman Nanami flicked effortlessly through stacks of real estate documents, finally pulling out one with the blessed sentence 200 ryo a month scrawled across the page. Nanami's sleek eyebrow rose as she looked at the 12-year-old genin, a manicured nail tapping lightly against the page. The neighborhood was not exactly prime real estate. Nestled on the eastern side of the red light district, it seemed more the residence of washed-up addicts than aspiring kunoichi. I'll take this one, thank you. Sakura mumbled the words, placing 2 months' worth of rent upon the counter, which Nanami took before disappearing into a nearby office, emerging minutes later with a single empty form and a grimy key. Sakura carefully signed her name, the characters for Harano staining the page with blue blood. They felt burned into Sakura's mind, as damning as the seal across her back. Sakura's fingers went white around the pen, Mabuki's words ringing in her ears. The Haranos do not raise monsters. You are no child of mine. Pushing the lease agreement back across the desk as though it were something vile, Sakura grabbed the key from Nanami's outstretched hand. 200 ryo a month seems downright expensive for this place, Sakura remarked aloud as she dumped the pack on the floor, half afraid the boards would break at the sudden weight considering. This apartment looks older than Konoha. In its entirety, Sakura estimated the apartment measured roughly 400 square feet. The central living space was bare. A window set into the far right wall did a poor job of letting in light. Covered as it was in filth, the glass cracked and dull. A small kitchen was tucked to the left of the door, complete with an oven, fridge, and counter. The color of the wooden floors had faded into a dull beige. Walls stained with watermarks, at least Sakura hoped they were watermarks. The sink scabbed over with rust. Striding towards it, she turned on the taps, rust flaking away beneath her palms. For a beat nothing happened, the faucet giving a loud screech of protest, water sputtering out in uneven bursts before it eventually began to flow. Turning away from the sink, she strode over to the singular window, wrenching it open to let in fresh air, the musty smell of dust and old sake giving her a headache. From her position at the far side of the apartment, Sakura could see into the small bathroom. The door opened to reveal a toilet, sink and shower crammed into the narrow space. Wiping dirt onto her pants, Sakura took a breath. From what she'd managed to gather, the apartment had nothing in the way of utensils, insulation, or even a stable plumbing system. The small space stank of previous residents, who, judging from the smell, had not been fans of hygiene. Taking small, lazy steps, Sakura took in her new home. The cobwebs stretched across the ceiling. Cigarette wounds burned in the door, dappled shadows pock-marking the wood like leopard spots. The whole place was rough, unkempt in a way that spoke of years of neglect. Paint had begun to peel in long strips from the walls, like plant ferns drooping in sudden heat. Sakura reached out to touch one only for it to crumble beneath her fingers. White ash dusting the ground like snow. The plumbing barely worked and she had yet to try the light switches. Sakura had always envisioned her first residence as a beautiful, multi-story house wreathed in endless flowers. A clawfoot tub on the second story overlooking an enormous garden. Abruptly the low hum of her neighbor's conversation escalated to full-blown shouting. Vicious curses and accusations rattling the walls. Sakura sighed. It's official. I live in a shithole. One that offers an excellent view of the nearby brick wall, Kawa added cheerfully. She snorted. A redeeming feature if I ever saw one. A loud scream from next door had Sakura freezing. Heart beating loudly as she instinctively gripped a kunai. Was someone being murdered? A yell followed by the crash of toppled furniture. Furious human voices barking like dogs. Sakura had taken 2 steps closer to her own door when the sound came again, distinctly softer. Sakura frowned in confusion. There had been no smaller indications of pain, nor could she scent any trace of blood. Even the earlier anger of the other occupant had faded. Fierce words seemingly shifting focus. A sensual moan filtered from next door and Sakura felt her heart stop. The kunai falling from frozen hands with a clink. The sounds escalated in intensity. Her eyes widened in horror. This was worse than murder. Infinitely worse. Face burning red. Sakura grabbed her pillow, burying her entire head in an effort to shut out the sounds. Number 200 Ryo is a downright criminal price. Kawa's tail flicked in distaste. Even the street might make a better option. As the women next door gasped out a request Sakura definitely did not need to hear, she grabbed the apartment key and bolted, slamming the door behind her with enough force to bring down the entire complex. If only I could be so lucky. Mercifully the noises had stopped when she returned hours later. Belly full of cheap convenience store meals. Closing the door to her apartment, Sakura took a breath before flicking on the light, wincing at the crackling buzz of faulty wiring before the lights flickered on. The glow was weak, leaving the corners of the room steeped in shadow. The effect reminding Sakura of peering into thick forest. Branches and foliage quickly lost in gloom. Laying out her meager sleeping mat and bedding, Sakura yawned, touching her tongue to her teeth and half expecting fangs. Although all her weapons were within easy reach, Sakura figured it would take an age to fall asleep. Her apartment protected by a single, flimsy lock in a district known for depravity. As she stretched out across the mat, the events of the past few months adopted a dreamlike quality. In a lot of ways it didn't seem real. That Sakura could lose her home, family, and innocence in so short a time. That everything in her life had led to this situation. A 12-year-old girl living in a shitty apartment in the red light district. Rats squeaking as they scrounged for non-existent crumbs. Shitty neighbors and virtually no money. Sakura rolled over, tracing a scar on her arm. I've survived everything so far. And I'll survive whatever is next. Kawa's jaw opened in a yawn, his lean body rippling as it wrapped carefully around her. Although the sensation was not physical, Sakura appreciated the gesture, enjoying the offered comfort, even if it was only inside her mind. The sound of shouting carried upwards from the street. 2 men arguing over the price of drugs. Someone in an alley nearby threw a bottle, glass shattering against stone. Sakura flinched at the sound. Shinobi endure. Kawa stated calmly. Shinobi endure. Sakura repeated. And even then, laying on the floor of her filthy, tiny apartment, Sakura smiled. Team 7 had returned last night. Chapter 8, Team 7 Take 2 Electric Boogaloo. Training Ground 3 was the same as she remembered. A barren clearing of dirt ringed by trees, many bearing evidence of shinobi training. Deep gauges cut into the wood and whole branches ripped from the trunk to leave broken stubs behind. Sakura had arrived at 7. Dressed in plain black leggings and a dark red shirt. Her hitayate was tied securely around her forehead, preventing any pink strands from falling into her eyes and also protecting her forehead, which is what it was designed for. Not to wear as a makeshift ribbon, Sakura, you idiot. Perching atop a large tree stump, Sakura remained still for all of 3 seconds before leaping up again, her body thrumming with energy. Where was everyone? Had they decided to rest for the day? From what she'd understood of their mission, it was frighteningly easy. A simple task of protecting the family of a local daimyo. Had it gone wrong? Team 7 does have a terrible track record when it comes to missions, but even so, I would have heard something by now. Are you sure? Sakura kicked at the wood. Her face twisted into a scowl of annoyance. It's been 30 minutes already. Kawa hummed. Perhaps they will not ever arrive and we shall fade into nothing. Sakura squinted up at the sun, charting its course across the sky. From her rough estimation, it had been at least an hour. Yes, Kakashi-sensei would be hours late, but where the fuck were her teammates? Just as she was considering the idea of leaving, a familiar scent touched her nose. Naruto. Oi. Sakura-chan. Sakura grinned as Naruto's voice, loud as ever, heralded his appearance. An orange bundle of energy emerging from the forest like a fox streaking after a hare. He stopped a meter or two away and grinned at her. Sakura took the opportunity to appraise him, noting the signature orange jumpsuit hadn't changed. His spiky blonde hair as wild as ever and the whisker marks across his cheeks just as prominent. It felt surreal to see her friend so unchanged when Sakura herself had been through so much. He drew closer, and the sensation of an older, different presence washed over her. Sakura flinched, muscles stiffening up as her body unconsciously shifted into a fighting stance. Such raw, unfiltered power lay beneath Naruto's skin. Sakura's fists clenched, the word Kyuubi echoing in silent answer to the unasked question. Kawa had frozen, his tongue flickering nervously as the power of the Kyuubi washed over them both. It was vast in a way Sakura had never seen. An endless ocean of red chakra contained within the body of a 12-year-old boy. It was enough to drown both her and Kawa, Kurama's jaws snapping down to swallow them both whole. Sakura's soul may hold a fragment of one, but Naruto held a god. Sakura-chan. His voice was tinged with uncertainty. Sakura blinked away the fear and smiled at him, reminded herself that this was Naruto. Sweet, innocent Naruto, who would sooner lose a limb than hurt his friends. Not that Sakura deserved to be counted as such. But I'm going to change that. Bridging what little distance remained between them felt akin to crossing the Harano doorway. A pivotal, vital moment disguised beneath a mundane action. Sakura's friend letting out an oof of surprise as she hugged him, new muscles squeezing with hard-earned strength. I missed you, Naruto, she breathed. The sound of their quiet breaths overlapped in the morning stillness. Ocean waves rushing forward only to retreat, one melding into the next until they were indistinguishable. Bird calls rang sweetly from the treetops, all manner of species chirping with delight at the start of a new day. Sakura rested her head against the crook of Naruto's shoulder, smiling as he began to splutter with embarrassment, face and ears burning red. "Sa Sakura-chan. I'm sorry," she burst out, interrupting whatever incoherent mess he was babbling. "I shouldn't have treated you as awfully as I did. Both as a member of Team 7 and back in the academy." She sniffled, horrified at the tears pricking her eyes but unable to stop as they slid down her cheeks. "And I'm so sorry, Naruto-kun, for everything I've ever said to you. Would you?" Her throat closed up and Sakura growled with frustration, prying it back open as one would a rusted door, the question rushing out in one jumbled sentence. "Would you please be my friend?" Sakura would have asked for forgiveness if that was what she truly wanted. But forgiveness had to be earned. And Naruto by his very nature was too forgiving. Which is why he desperately needed a friend to stand beside. Someone to protect him from the hatred of the villagers that festered like poison in the heart of Konoha. I want to be his friend. The only boy who ever truly accepted me, even at my most brash. The arms around her started to shake and Sakura flinched, alarmed. Had she said something wrong? Sakura withdrew enough to look at Naruto's face just as it scrunched up comically, him bursting into tears as her words registered. Sakura had grin. How was it this boy held so much power? Ruffling his hair affectionately, Sakura pulled him back into a hug, uncaring of the growing wet patch on her shoulder. Why, you really mean it, Sakura-chan. I wouldn't lie to you, Naruto-kun. Looking up at her, he smiled. The utter love and trust in those blue eyes sending a dagger of guilt straight to her heart. How many times had Sakura brushed aside his affection, throwing insults and punches at every opportunity? Whether he was a Jinhyuki or not, it shouldn't matter. The bias of the village and her own childish dislike had colored her actions long enough. Now I'm going to become a friend Naruto can rely on. A teammate. A twig snapped nearby and both Sakura and Naruto jumped, leaping apart and immediately drying their tears. Sakura straightening her outfit as she struggled for some semblance of composure. She looked up just in time to see Kakashi and Sasuke emerge from the forest path. The former holding a familiar, brightly colored book, the latter his trademark scowl. Sakura waited for her heart rate to increase, for her stomach to swarm with butterflies at the sight of him. And yet, nothing happened. I've outgrown you, she thought, unable to keep the faint hint of relief and satisfaction at bay. It really was just a stupid childhood crush. Sure, Sasuke was good to look at. His fine-boned features and inky black eyes enough to make any girl swoon. And yet his haughtiness, his obsession with revenge and his complete disregard for anyone weaker than himself made him not just a shitty teammate, but a shitty person as well. Yo, Sakura. Kakashi held up a hand in greeting. Trademark eye smile curving his face. Although his tone was relaxed, Sakura couldn't help but notice the cold intelligence within his gaze. The way that single gray flicked over her form, effortlessly peeling her apart layer by layer. Swallowing, Sakura forced herself to meet his gaze. Almost quaking under the force of it, now she understood the hierarchy of power. How it felt to live at the bottom. Almost instinctively her head tilted downwards. The ground a safer place than. Stop it. What was she doing? This was Kakashi. Her lazy, smut-reading teacher who nonetheless did his best to protect his students. I'm stronger now. Sakura looked up and smiled, returning his wave. And one day I'll be able to protect you too, sensei. Welcome back, Kakashi-sensei. She offered a nod of greeting to Sasuke, who returned it. A bird twittered overhead and the silver-haired Jounin clapped his hands together. To celebrate the return of Team 7, I've thought up the perfect mission. Sakura and Naruto both gulped. Please let it be anything but more D ranks. Nay, sensei, it better not be more D ranks. Unfortunately not. Kakashi's voice dropped a note, the intensity in his tone surprising Sakura. Perhaps it really will be something good. Your mission. Her sensei's hand dropped to the pouch on his leg and Sakura's heart beat faster in excitement. Is to retrieve Naruto's nightcap. Flourishing a piece of white fabric, it took Sakura an instant to recognize it as the bizarre, mutated penguin hat Naruto insisted on wearing to bed. You're kidding, right? She whispered the question over Naruto's indignant squawks. That's mine. Give it back, Kakashi-sensei. Naruto leapt for the hat only for Kakashi to hold it easily out of his reach, deftly avoiding the furious punches aimed in retaliation. I want you three to capture this flag from me by the end of, say dash. Kakashi tilted his head upwards. Bright silver hair shining like liquid moonlight. Dash 4 p.m. Sasuke shoved his hands into his pockets, rocking back slightly on his heels, an action which always preceded a question, which Sakura knew after years of stalking watching him. Do we have to work together? He asked blandly. Kakashi hummed, idly sticking out a leg as Naruto ran at him again, sending the blonde sprawling into the dirt. Teamwork is optional for this exercise. He said something else Sakura didn't catch as she walked toward the spluttering blonde. Offering a hand for Naruto, she grinned at the dirt smudges across his cheeks. The shy smile he offered as he took her hand, a precious memory Sakura would forever treasure. When do we start, sensei? Rather than give an answer, Kakashi's body flickered away. No trace of his presence left behind. Simultaneously, Team 7 sighed. Oi Sasuke. Where are you going? Naruto caught the raven-haired boy's arm as he made to leap into the trees. Teamwork is optional for today. And you, Dub, will just slow me down. Scowling, he twisted out of Naruto's hold. Sakura placing a hand on her teammate's back as he made to follow Sasuke. Just leave it, Naruto. He'll slow us down. She tugged at his sleeve, gesturing in the opposite direction. Let's go that way. Sure, Sakura-chan. We'll kick his ass. Tabeo. An hour later and that sentence continued to mock her. Sakura scowling as she pushed aside a branch to better scan the forest. Doing her best to remain as quiet as possible. Naruto practically vibrating with energy at her side. This is hopeless. Tabeo. Come out, sensei, you coward. She winced at the volume. Amazing how one Naruto can be so loud. Frustration burned in her gut as the forest yielded no signs of movement. Sakura gritted her teeth, wishing she could see through wood. I do not know about seeing through things, but there is perhaps something you could try. What? Snakes can sense heat signatures. Afraid to state the obvious, but just try it. Forming her hands into the snake seal, Sakura let Kawa's instructions wash through her. Casting her chakra in a wide, thin net. This is so stupid. Nothing's happening. Keep going. The world shifted. Color seeping from the trees like watercolor paint, turning everything black and white. The only hint of it a small red flicker to her left. Wait. The rest of her remained motionless as Sakura turned her head towards it. Following the silhouette as it moved languidly through the trees. Too big to be an animal. It took her another moment to realize the small red blotch was human-shaped. Only at such a distance it was barely distinguishable. Naruto. She hissed, waiting until he turned startled eyes on her. I've found Kakashi, and I've got an idea. Shadow Clone Jutsu. Disguised as her blonde teammate and crouched in the shadowed alcove of a tree, Sakura watched as dozens of Naruto clones flung themselves into the clearing. Kakashi barely glancing up from the book he held as he deflected them. Sakura reached into her senbon pouch, tensing expectantly. Timing was everything and she would not fuck this up. Just as they had planned, the Naruto clones surrounded Kakashi in a tight circle. Yelling and throwing weapons as they sought to keep his attention. Focusing on her chakra, Sakura envisioned a thick cloak thrown over the tiny energy pulses all chakra emitted. Wrapping it in tight thread until it faded to nothing. Chakra suppression was tricky. Requiring in-depth knowledge of the body's chakra system and an intense focus to maintain. Sakura was far from a master, but after weeks of practicing she wasn't bad. It felt odd to yell as she leapt from her hiding spot. Yet it wouldn't have been a true Naruto attack without announcing her presence. Blending in with the clones, Sakura did her best to dodge the jostling bodies. Elbows and fists striking out as her vision filled with orange and yellow. Pushing her way to the front lines, she discreetly threw the senbon. Hitting several vital spots on the closest clones. They vanished with a puff of white smoke. Sakura using the low visibility to throw several more senbon at Kakashi. She knew they wouldn't hit, yet the moment of distraction would be just as important. The fog cleared to reveal empty space. The air rippled behind her and Sakura leapt aside just in time to avoid a nasty kick to the ribs. Retreating to a safe distance, she eyed her teacher warily. Kunao at the ready. The flag was tied to his upper arm. Fluttering slightly in the wind. Sakura's focus narrowed down to that objective. Determination driving her forward. Over the weeks Team 7 had been gone, her fitness had improved dramatically. Asuma, upon finding her practicing taijutsu alone one night, had offered to train her whenever he had a free afternoon. It had only happened a few times, yet Sakura adored the one-on-one teaching. Asuma easily improving the weaknesses in her stances and strengthening the force of her hits. Specializing in close-range combat, many of the moves he taught would not help her with Kakashi. Still, if Sakura could lower his guard enough. Her thoughts were interrupted as a fist connected with her jaw, sending her flying back into a nearby tree. Winded, Sakura lay gasping on the ground. Glaring up at Kakashi as she fought to regain her breath. Cheek aching fiercely. She'd also bitten her tongue, if the metallic taste in her mouth was anything to go by. Dog-hearted bastard. Staggering upright, she braces an arm against the trunk. Breathing heavily. Kakashi stood in the center of the clearing, currently fending off Naruto's counter-attack. Shaking her head to clear it, which only made the wound on her face ache more. Sakura ran up the tree, darting from branch to branch as effortlessly as she was able, circling the clearing as she waited for Kakashi to turn his back. Now, flinging a barrage of senbon, shuriken, and kunao, Sakura aimed each at a different vital spot. All those hours of target practice finally paying off. Momentarily overwhelmed by the Naruto clones and Sakura's attack, Kakashi jumped backwards in a bid to escape, Sakura following after him as she vaulted from the tree trunk, channeling small traces of chakra into her legs to increase the power. Her feet kicked up dirt as she landed a sparse few meters away from Kakashi, wasting no time as Asuma had taught her before closing the gap. His gray eyes widened in surprise as Sakura feinted left before dropping into a sweeping kick, smoothly drawing a kunao and plunging it towards his femoral vein. Kakashi lashed out with a kick that knocked her head back. Ignoring the pain and the stars that exploded behind her eyes, Sakura grabbed his sleeve, pulling herself forward. Her fingers grazed the edge of the flag before it vanished from her grasp. Left panting in the dirt, Sakura spat blood, looking up at Kakashi with bared teeth. So close. Naruto collapsed on the ground beside her, both of them coughing and wheezing. Sakura rolling onto her back with a groan. "We'll get him next time, Tabeo." "Yes," Sakura breathed. "We will." None of them got the flag. All three genin were bruised and bloody, clothes torn and muscles aching from running through the forest all day. Kakashi, by contrast, looked entirely unaffected, and Sakura hated him all the more for it. Kakashi, dangling Naruto's nightcap, offered another eye smile. "None of you managed to get the flag," he announced cheerfully. "Tch." Sasuke folded his arms and glowered. Sakura resisted the urge to giggle. "Sakura-chan almost got it, Tabeo." Kakashi held up a finger. "Almost is never good enough for a mission." Brushing back a strand of silver hair, he surveyed them all. "It was my hope you three would work together." His gaze fixed on Sasuke. "Teamwork is never optional." In the silence that followed, they all fidgeted awkwardly, annoyed that Kakashi's blatant lie had not been detected earlier. "Meet at 7 tomorrow." The Jounin vanished in a swirl of leaves. Sakura glared at the empty space. "No matter how famous he is, that man will always be an idiot." Both Naruto and Sasuke nodded sagely. Kakashi Hatake had returned from the latest mission expecting Sakura to remain unchanged, blushing and falling over herself to please Sasuke and uninterested in much else. A shinobi he expected wouldn't last the year. When he first saw her again, he almost did a double take, brain short-circuiting as Kakashi tried to connect this new genin in front of him with the girl of before. She'd put on weight, the beginnings of muscle showing in slight curves and lines throughout her body. Sakura's eyes were darker than Kakashi remembered, filled with shadows that had no right to be in a 12-year-old's face. Her usual red dress was gone, replaced by practical attire. Long pink hair cut short and hitaite tied around her forehead. When senbon had been flung at him, Kakashi almost choked, leaping out of the way as a hailstorm of steel tried to assault him. That vicious glint in her eyes when Sakura attacked him had been new, as was the unflinching trajectory of the kunao she aimed towards his femoral artery. Scratching Pakun's head, Kakashi flopped onto the couch with a sigh, staring up at the cracks in the ceiling as though they held the answers. "I didn't sign up for this," he muttered. Pakun let out a snore. Standing outside Ichiraku's and comfortably full of ramen, Sakura smiled at her companion. Backlit by the glow of the store, the light cast his hair in sharper definition, illuminating the blonde spikes until they shone like spun gold. The deep blue of his eyes sparkling as he grinned. "Thank you for tonight, Naruto. I had fun." And it had been, surprisingly so. Sakura inhaling her food whilst Naruto regaled her with tales of previous pranks. At one point she'd laughed so hard noodles came out her nose. Sakura's horrified expression sending the other customers into hysterics. Hesitantly, Naruto took a step forward, a look of uncertainty crossing his face, as though he weren't quite sure if Sakura would lash out. Hating such wariness, she pulled him into another hug. Naruto froze for another instant before his strong arms wrapped around her. A love that gave, demanding nothing in return. And perhaps it was the serpent, but Sakura had been cold for so long she'd forgotten what warmth felt like. That creeping frost of doubt, driven by her terrified thoughts that Naruto would never forgive her, that nobody would ever accept this new version of her, gradually melted away. "Good night, Naruto." She offered up a shy smile, which he returned it. Whisker marks across his cheeks crinkling adorably. "Good night, Sakura-chan. I like him." Kawa's voice whispered. Sakura nodded her head as she began the walk home. "He's like sunshine," she murmured aloud. "And I don't want to hide in shadows anymore." Chapter 9, Dull Blades, Sharp Mind. Cha. If I have to pull one more weed. Sakura punched the ground with a yell of frustration, ignoring Sasuke's raised eyebrow. Naruto nodding in furious agreement even as he reached for a darkly colored plant that Sakura realized at the same time he did was covered in tiny thorns. Leaping upright with a screech, the blonde waved his hand maniacally through the air, struggling to dislodge the tiny, vicious needles lodged into skin. Sakura brushed dirt from her palms as she stood to help him, knees popping after so long spent crouched. "That's a barberry plant, dope," Sasuke said, a smirk growing on his face as Sakura forced Naruto to still, her callus brushing against his own as she lightly touched the palm of his hand, fingertips pinching the root of a thorn in order to yank it out. "I think he's realized that, Sasuke K-. Sakura coughed. Sasuke. Old habits die hard. That particular one should have died long ago. Go choke on a rodent, you snide reptile." She yanked out a thorn with slightly more force than necessary and Naruto cursed. "D-rank missions suck, Tabeo." Sakura muttered a fierce affirmation before both of them glanced at Sasuke. A beat of silence wherein the Uchiha looked confused. "Yeah," he finally muttered. Sakura removed the remaining spicules in Naruto's hand, wishing she could stab them into Kakashi's face. 7 days of nothing but D-rank missions and she was ready to snap. Surveying the garden beds now mercifully free of weeds, Sakura pushed sweaty hair back from her face. Exhaling a breath, she glanced up at the sky. The sun blazed down from directly overhead like the fiery golden eye of an ancient god. "Aheo, sensei," came Sasuke's cordial voice. Sakura turned to see Kakashi, silver hair as unkempt as ever and signature flak jacket firmly in place despite it being 28 degrees. "You're late," Naruto and Sakura yelled, faces red from exertion and the heat screwed up in anger as they pointed accusing fingers at Kakashi. The Jounin eyed them lazily. "Ma, I forgot to set my alarm." Sakura bit back a retort. "Of all the shitty excuses. What are we doing today?" Though Sasuke's voice was carefully composed, Sakura could detect a thread of annoyance. "Amusing to note that even the infamous last Uchiha is irked by your sensei. There is no one alive that sensei could not irritate. I thought you were supposed to meet us before we continued this job from yesterday." Sakura clenched her teeth as Kakashi shrugged, nonplussed by the anger radiating off his students in waves. "I thought I'd give you all a head start." He offered a signature eye smile. "And it looks like you've done a fine job." "No thanks to you, Tabeo." Sakura scrubbed at her hands in a vain attempt to remove the base layer of dirt. It clung stubbornly to her skin. An elbow-length pair of earthen gloves she could not remove. "Kakashi-sensei, tell me you are going to teach us a jutsu today." Sakura's tone rose at the end, the statement morphing into a question without her desire. Biting her tongue to keep from begging him, she glanced up at Kakashi from underneath her lashes. The Jounin cocked his head in thought, the hand holding that cursed book tapping rhythmically against his thigh. "An excellent idea, Sakura-chan." Her heart soared with delight. Naruto's face split into a huge grin as he cheered and even Sasuke looked excited, his lips twitched upward, the Uchiha equivalent of a victory dance. A new jutsu, finally. Kakashi closed the Ika book with a snap. "But first, I think we could all do with some more physical conditioning. Let's say, 5 laps around Konoha." All 3 genin groaned. Sweat streaked and covered in dirt before this latest torture had even begun. Naruto was the first to regain his energy. "All right. I'll run 5 laps and then you better teach me a new jutsu, Tabeo." He set off at a sprint, kicking up an impressive dust cloud as he disappeared down the road. "Ma, are you going to let him beat you?" Sasuke. TCH, the raven-haired boy grunted. He set off at a deliberately slow pace, one that Sakura couldn't help but notice quickly sped up. He's just as competitive as Naruto. Sakura sighed as she forced her aching body into a slow jog. There would be time to go faster. At her current level of fitness, keeping up with the boys was impossible. A scant few months of effort could not compete with years of dedication. Ordinarily Sakura would feel worse about such a situation. There had been many times after the past week as she'd looked at Sasuke and Naruto always so far ahead of her. So much stronger. Running whilst she was barely learning to walk. The Uzumaki and Uchiha clan symbols sewn onto their jackets bobbing with every movement. Sakura now saw them even in her dreams. Her own clothes bore the white outline of a circle, the symbol of the clanless. One that reminded her every day she had no Kekkei Genkai, bore no clan traits or had any special techniques. Nothing but civilian blood flowed through Sakura's veins. That dimmed circle of color, wrapping around her throat from the moment she chose the path of shinobi. Kawa's indigo body encircled her, scales gleaming and sapphire eyes alight with inner fire. His forehead rested against hers. Elegant, hissing voice filling that space inside her mind. How delicious will it feel, when all those restraints finally shatter? Clenching her teeth against the pain, Sakura ran faster. The acid burning through her legs, tearing a path for stronger, tougher muscle to form. It will make everything worth it. Approximately 24 hours later. Beating the absolute shit out of a training post was not how Sakura envisioned her reunion with Team 7. 8 days since the "Capture the Flag" incident, and it seemed Kakashi still firmly believed more D-rank missions would solve their apparent lack of teamwork. This is all Sasuke's fault. Naruto and I worked together perfectly. Sakura had underestimated just how big Konoha was. The time it had taken to run 5 laps around the village measured not in minutes but hours. The sun had long set by the time she stumbled, panting, back into that very same garden. Team 7 had long since retired for the night. Sakura could have given up hours ago and they would still have been gone. Yet she didn't, the final 3 laps fueled purely by spite. The stubborn conviction that, where Kakashi expected her to fail, Sakura would succeed. Sprawled out across the lawn, Sakura gazed up at the darkness. Nothing but the soft summer air and the cold stars for company. The world outlined in darkened shadows and enveloped by inky blue night. Night creatures scurrying through the trees and along rooftops as she took the backroads home. The red light district certainly lived up to its name. Cobblestone streets cast in pale crimson by the glowing neon signs outside every shop front. Many proclaiming services Sakura did not want to think about. Cigarette smoke and the earthy, slightly burnt smell of something she couldn't place hung like a thin layer of smog over the area. Scantily clad men, women, and non-binary folk lounged against walls, whistling invitingly to passerby who stopped for a second appraisal. The whole area stank of debauchery. Pleasure and desperation merging into a heady mix that made her head swim. "Hey cutie." Sakura walked faster, hunching her shoulders and shrinking into herself. "I'm talking to you, Pinky. How much for a night?" Fear shot through her gut, heart beating at a sickening pace as the sound of male laughter grew louder. No, anything but this." Kawa coiled anxiously. Twisting and twining around himself, his body instinctively flattened. Struggling to make himself as large as possible whilst Sakura, in an ironic contradiction, tried desperately to disappear. "Oi girlie." A thick, meaty hand closed around her small wrist. The overpowering stink of body odor and cheapsake washing over her. Blind panic settling in as the man leered. Thick black eyebrows bristling over deep-set eyes. A broad nose and mouth matching the solid bulk of his frame. Sakura tugged at her arm, but it didn't so much as budge. The hold just shy of bruising. I," she stammered, struggling to speak as her throat closed up. The man looked over her. Taller by a good few feet, though to Sakura it seemed much more. "Why don't you come with me and we can have a real good time?" Thinly layered promise dripped like rotten honey from every word. "Punch him. Stab him. Fight back. You're supposed to be a ninja for Hokage's sake." Inside her mind, Kawa was just as terrified. Eyes wide and pupils fiercely dilated. Curled into himself as tightly as possible. as though he too wished to be anywhere else. Abruptly he began to walk, dragging Sakura away from the light and towards the nearest alley, its gaping maw opening wide to swallow her whole. The shadows, offset by the crimson lights, flickered like silhouettes at the edges. Garbage, bile, and body odor, a nauseating aroma. Sakura dug her feet into the ground, leaning back with all her weight as they drew closer. For all the good it did, she may have been a fly. The man's strides turned purposeful, the sick light in his eyes reflected in the twisted grin of his lips. It was at this point her voice finally returned. A sharp, high-pitched scream of terror. Sakura clawing at the arm that held her, trying to tear as much flesh off as she could. A feral cat caught in a snare. Sakura didn't call out to anyone, the sound erupting out of her mouth on pure instinct. No one would come for her. The act of trying, a product of ancient instinct. It felt better to try, than to simply accept fate. Help would never come for the worthless. After all, that had been true underground. It would be true here. Cruelty bore many faces, human greed remained unchanged. The man grunted in annoyance, giving a sharp yank that sent her stumbling forwards. He twisted at the same instant to sink a fist into her gut. Sakura doubled over at the starburst of pain, air leaving her lungs in a single breath. No, she wheezed. The man's face was half cast in shadow, the light from a nearby window illuminating his right side, the lines of his cheek cast into sharp focus. On the left his eye glinted, a beady black gaze watching her as a crow would a fresh carcass. He reached for her again, enormous hand looming. Sakura shut her eyes, unwilling to see whatever came next. As good sir. A new voice, elegant and rough at the same time. Smooth music played on burnt instruments. The voice of an angel, the throat of a smoker. Sakura opened her eyes. The stranger had the perv pinned against the wall, an arm braced against his throat. At roughly 6'3" the stranger towered over them both. Well-muscled body clad in fishnet stockings, sleek black boots and a purple vest that left little to the imagination. Curly black hair was tied back from his face, which as he turned to Sakura was skillfully decorated with makeup. Dustings of gold highlighting the deep brown of his eyes. Full lips and high cheekbones emphasized by cherry red lipstick and subtle contour. I believe the young lady would kindly like you to fuck off. He spat the sentence with so much venom Sakura actually flinched. The perv growled out a curse that cut off into a strangled sound as Sakura's savior pressed tighter against his throat. If I or any of my companions see that loathsome face again he leaned so close their faces were mere inches apart. Voice turning deadly quiet, then I will gladly slit your throat. The perv grunted as he was punched solidly in the jaw, head snapping around with the blow. A tooth skittered across the stones, droplets of blood spattering the ground. The muffled shriek that followed cut off as he choked on blood, hand clasped to his mouth as crimson streamed down between his fingers. Wide, terrified eyes glanced at them both before he set off at a dead sprint. Sakura listened as the sound of his footsteps gradually faded away, swallowed by the hustle of the district, who remained uncaring of what had just occurred. The fashionable man smirked, wiping a drop of blood from his cheek and examining the red imprint on his fingertips. Should have knocked out another tooth, he muttered. Thank you, Sakura said quietly, quailing as he turned to face her. Hip cocked to one side and arms crossed he examined her. Not the analytical gaze of a shinobi but the appraising eyes of one who knew other forms of struggle. Lighting a cigarette he took a drag, smoke trailing up from the orange nub. Look Pinky, I don't know why you're here and I don't care. But keep acting so scared and meek, and these streets will eat you alive. The cigarette dangling between perfectly manicured hands still dusted with blood, cast a poignant image. Sakura could only nod, small tremors still racking her body from what had almost happened. A loud sigh expelled a cloud of nicotine. Gleaming eyes accentuated by obsidian eyeliner peering through the smoke. Pinky, that's hardly a reassuring response. Sakura brushed back a lock of hair, a nervous tick. How? Her throat went dry and she swallowed before trying again. How do I not seem weak? How can I make people like him leave me alone? The queen flicked her forehead, cherry red lips quirking upward. That monster inside you? Let it out. Sakura watched him sashay away. Heels clicking over the street and looking for all the world as though he owned the place. Sakura did her best to imitate him as she walked home, letting that fierce, brash side of her shine through as much as she was able. Her and Kawa glaring at everyone they passed with fangs bared. The door to her dingy apartment creaked open and Sakura collapsed onto her makeshift bed, instantly falling into deep, exhausted sleep. The mission the following day was vegetable sorting. 3 hours of waiting for Kakashi followed by 3 more hours of examining capsicum. Sakura's brain on autopilot as she numbly inspected the shiny red surfaces for damage before placing them into a box. Naruto and Sasuke similarly zombie-like beside her. The paycheck at the end of it was only a slight sweetener. Sakura counting the money and noting with relief she now had enough for food and rent. In 10 years you might be able to upgrade to a bigger dingy apartment. With this amount of pay? Try 50. Naruto ran off the instant they were done, screaming something about it being ramen day with Irika Tabeo. Sasuke and Kakashi both vanished without a sound, likely using Sakura's momentary distraction as the perfect opportunity, which brought her to now punching the training post and dearly wishing it were Kakashi's face. Screaming insults that would have made Mabuki faint. Wood chips flicked into the air like ocean spray. The training pole withstanding the assault, as though it were the final leg of a pier, stubbornly clinging on to life against the furious battering of ocean waves. Sakura didn't stop even as her fists began to sting, uncaring as the knuckles split and blood dripped from the cuts. Yeah, no kid, I'd pay good money to have you do that to Haytake for real. Startled, Sakura paused mid-punch, the women leaning against the post regarding her with smirk. She hadn't been there a second ago. Akunoichi. Easily Jounin level. Kawa stirred uneasily. She smells. Sakura's brow furrowed, her hand closing around the handle of a kunao. Like what? Can't you tell? She took a breath, noting the earthy richness of the forest, the salty taste of her own sweat and the iron tang of blood. Sweetness was the first thing Sakura noticed. Rice and honey and something fainter, strawberry? Comprehension clicked. She just smells like dango. It's a dessert. Kawa huffed. Beneath that, Sakura tried again and this time she paused. A sickly smell of overripe berries. The juice so past sweet it had turned sour. Poison. She smells like poison. This one is deadly. More so than many others we have encountered. Deadlier than Kakashi? Yes. This Kunoichi, she would not hesitate to kill you. Looking again at the woman, Sakura noticed the faint gleam to her eyes. A spark of madness in light brown depths. A tiger trapped in human skin. Eyeing the hungry, predatory way she sauntered forwards, Sakura was inclined to agree. Unfortunately Sakura started, amazed when her voice came out steady. He'd actually have to be around for me to do that. Her anger resurfacing with a vengeance, Sakura resumed her assault. Teeth clenched hard enough to hurt, she threw all her strength went into every hit. The wood creaking and groaning beneath bloodied fists. Splinters stinging like fire ants beneath the skin. When a hand caught her wrist, Sakura let out a hiss of rage, glaring up at the woman, uncaring of how dangerous it may be. It had been a shitty 2 weeks. All I want is to punch something and scream. Is that too much to ask? You're not even hitting it properly. The woman shoved her aside, rolling back the sleeves of her trench coat and casting Sakura a wicked grin. Let me, Mitarashi Anko, show you how it's done. Anko's first punch split the post clean in two, the top half flying across the training ground to crash into a tree. Sakura had never seen anything so beautiful. Kid, I've told you 1,000 times you need to look up as you punch. It's no good to stare at the ground. A panting, sweat-drenched Sakura nodded, the muscles in her legs and arms quivering with fatigue. Anko Mitarashi stood a few paces away, not a lock of spiky purple hair out of place. Her outfit a beige trench coat, fishnet bodysuit, and orange skirt as bizarre and impeccable as ever. Even if Sakura had the breath to criticize Anko's fashion sense, she wouldn't have dared. The woman was fucking terrifying. Whatever horrors had occurred throughout her shinobi career had left their mark. Shown in the careless way she juggled shuriken and kunai, blades flashing in the sunlight as she threw one after another at Sakura. The weapons as Sakura promptly dodged, lodging deeply into the wood. Anko was as comfortable with tools of murder as she was with dango sticks. Neither very far from her person. Anko, Sakura had discovered in that very first lesson, was not entirely sane. Some time ago her psyche had broken. A china bowl dropped from a great height only to be put back together with gold streams of madness. Parts of Sakura's new friend, teacher, were coldly calculating. Viciously smart and quick to point out all her flaws. Not to embarrass or insult but rather to fix. Telling Sakura to change the positioning of her body until her Taijutsu stances were rock solid. Sakura's movements becoming less and less clumsy as the days wore on. Muscles remembering the correct forms as Anko rushed to attack. Ducking under punches and dodging kicks. Retaliating whenever the Jounin's guard dropped. Soon her fists left gaping holes in the training post. Sakura's Taijutsu now good enough to spar with Naruto and for a record 3 minutes even Sasuke. It was all thanks to Anko. Sakura's impromptu Jounin teacher, as violent as she was skilled. And loud. Swinging her legs atop a nearby tree stump, Anko swallowed a bite of dango. The other hand carelessly tossing and catching poison senbon. Alright minion. Let's see you dodge this. Sakura yelped as a fist connected with her cheek. The Jounin body flickering across training ground 5 in a single blink. One hit sent the genin flying across the clearing. Sakura twisting in midair to land on the ground. Skidding backward across the dirt. Barely keeping her balance as her feet left trenches in the earth. The wound on her face already throbbing. Anko never held punches. Neither did she give any warning. A shinobi must be ready for anything. Sakura's unofficial sensei saying. Gleefully releasing a barrage of shuriken and senbon which the pink-haired girl dove to avoid. The blades whistling through the air as they swept past like cherry blossoms caught on the wind. Except these cherry blossoms will slice your skin open. Yes, I'm aware. Just making sure. Kawa's voice was irritatingly smug, though Sakura resisted the urge to yell at him as she focused on running vertically up a tree trunk. Channeling chakra into her feet and keeping an ear out for flying weaponry. Clenching her core muscles to remain upright, Sakura pivoted on one foot as the air whistled. Using the edge of her kunai, she deflecting the shuriken aimed towards her neck. Metal clashing against metal. Not wasting a moment she leapt into the safety of the leaves. The green foliage providing some semblance of protection. Sakura's body froze. Absolutely motionless even as her eyes, ears, and nose scanned for danger. It had been little more than a month since Anko had found her screaming at a wooden post and offered to fight her. Sakura trying for hours that first night to land even a single hit. Only stopping when all her energy and her anger was spent. Uncaring as the Jounin beat her black and blue in the process. Aside from some uneventful C-rank missions, Team 7's official training was still woefully lacking. While the boys sparred or argued, Sakura remained on the sidelines. Reading books and pretending her body didn't ache from independent training. That the slices and bruises from Anko's surprise attacks hurt more than Kakashi's indifference. Why hadn't Kakashi-sensei taught her a single jutsu? Was she really so useless? Naruto had Shadow Clone, Sasuke had all the Uchiha training and as the last of his clan all the support he would ever need. Sakura had nothing. Just her wits, a dirty apartment and a snake. I'm part Baijuya. A snake with stolen chakra. A flicker of movement to the left. The faintest hint of dango tickling her nose and Sakura moved. Leaping onto a higher branch and throwing a kunai. Aiming straight towards Anko's jugular. Using her forward momentum, Sakura pushed off the branch, air whooshing in her ears as she backflipped. The world vaguely disorientating now it was upside down. Refusing to let it bother her, she unclasped the senbon pouch to throw several in Anko's direction. Making sure to aim at many different vital points, therefore making it harder to dodge. Sakura landed in a crouch back on solid earth. Straightening her legs and looking wildly around for Anko. The woman standing a short distance away, when had she gotten there, cackled manically. Noticing the shallow slice across Anko's cheekbone, Sakura blinked. Had she done that? Sakura watched as blood gradually pooled, enough to send a single crimson drop arcing down the woman's face. Anko touching a hand to it, licking the blood off her fingers with glee. Well done, Pinky-chan, I'm impressed. In the weeks they'd been training together, Sakura had never once managed to hit her. To have actually done it felt surreal. A smile tugged at her mouth. Finally. Countless bruises, cuts, concussions, fractured bones and tears had gone into earning that single drop of blood. The tiny wound on the Jounin's face, one of Sakura's proudest achievements. Hopefully it will scar. Now then. Anko clapped her hands together, startling Sakura from her reverie. I think you've earned yourself a jutsu. Sakura's grin was so wide her entire face ached. This was going to be fun. Suten. Water Fang Bullet Jutsu. Concentrating her chakra, Sakura envisioned small parts of it breaking off, sinking into the water beneath her feet to coalesce into balls. Projectiles which she then launched at Anko, waving her arm forward and directing them towards the Jounin's blind spots. It was already the third day, and Sakura was soaking wet, panting and exhausted. Anko had warned her this particular jutsu was difficult. B-ranked, it required impeccable chakra control. Sakura had researched hundreds of water-style jutsu, knowing instinctively any other would be beyond her right now. Her new chakra was new. Fierce in a way she had never experienced before. The chakra of a Baijuya. Amaka burned away part of your old chakra pathways, rebuilding them alongside Three Tails chakra. His hope was to fuse the two so completely, the need for Funin jutsu, and the accompanying risks, would be removed entirely. How do you know that? I sensed it when our souls merged. Heard it in your screams. A cold sweat ran down her spine and Sakura shivered. It doesn't matter. I'll become strong whatever I have to face. Starting with this. Suten, Shugaiden was hugely versatile, manipulating condensed balls of water to launch at opponents. Sakura would be able to attack from any direction at any time. The camouflaged nature of the jutsu the projectiles formed underwater only added to the impact. If only she could master it. The chakra needs to more compressed. Anko called out, forming her hands into the tiger sign. A water sphere the size of a cannonball shot directly towards Sakura's face. The Jounin laughing as she shrieked, clumsily repelling it with her own water jutsu. That's it, Pinky-chan. Now make them deadlier. 3 more cannonballs rocketed towards her. The water controlled by Anko's chakra spinning rapidly, as though someone had thrown baseballs at high speed. Of course she added the deadly rotations. True mastery of Suten, Water Fang Bullet Jutsu was shown in the rapid cycling movements of the water spheres. Damage significantly increased by the speed at which the chakra forced it to rotate. Katon, Ryukan no Jutsu. Fire poured from Anko's mouth in a jet of flame, shooting directly towards Sakura. The heat racing across her body even before it touched her skin. Glowing orange flames coalescing into the head of a dragon as the wave rushed towards her. The beast's maw opening wide as it shot closer. Fuck. Forming the tiger seal, Sakura reached for her chakra, imbuing it with all the urgency she could muster. Imagine you're making bubbles. Condensed, deadly energy bubbles. That doesn't even make any sense. For once, can't you just be supportive? You're right. I should just clap my hands on the sidelines. You don't have. Forget it. Spheres of water the size of boulders were pulled from the river, rising above the water to encircle Sakura in a tight ring, preventing the fire from touching her. Even so, she closed her eyes as the dragon's jaw opened, tongues of flame licking hungrily. The collision came with the hiss of fire meeting water, steam rising into the air with scalding intensity, enveloping Sakura completely. Taking advantage of the momentary cover, Sakura ran for the trees, clones of her dispersing in all directions. They weren't corporal like Naruto's, yet Bunshin no Jutsu was one even Sakura knew. Of course, the clones would only slow Anko for a brief moment. That's all I need. Suten, Shugaiden no Jutsu, Sakura whispered. More balls of water rose from the nearby river. Anko still standing in the center of the stream, jumping out of the way as they spun towards her. It won't be that easy. The jutsu followed Anko as she twisted through the air. Enormous boulders rocketing toward her at high speed. From so high up, Anko looked tiny, slashing with kunao at the projectiles. Water droplets raining like diamond fragments onto the ground below. Noticing a slight break in Anko's defenses, Sakura struck. Water slamming into the Jounin's gut to send her crashing into the ground. The impact reverberating through the earth. The pink-haired genin cheered. Anko's prone form lay in the center of a crater. Cracks spider webbing out to form tiny canyons. Carefully stepping over them, Sakura couldn't help her satisfaction. The Jounin who had gleefully trained her for weeks, now lying winded, in the ground. Anko's breathing was unsteady. A nasty cut along her jaw already swelling blue. Hesitantly, Sakura leaned over, her shadow stretching across the ground to fall on Anko. The Jounin's thin groan reached the genin's ears as Anko pulled herself into a sitting position. One hand clasped across her stomach. "Damn you brat," Anko wheezed. Murderous expression clashing with the fierce pride lining her voice. Sakura grinned. A shinobi must be ready for anything. Anko fell back onto the ground with a sigh. "I hate you." Walking home that night, Sakura couldn't help but smile. Her chakra coils aching like overstretched muscles as she made her way through the red light district. Weak evening sunlight falling in patches from gaps in the rooftops. Puddles of golden light in otherwise dingy streets. This part of Konoha no longer scared her. Sakura walked with shoulders back and head high. No trace of fear in her emerald eyes or skittishness in her movements. People huddled smoking in alleyways eyed Sakura as she passed. The girl merely smirked, letting some of her bloodlust rise to the surface. The men recoiled. Sometimes, the title of shinobi meant being merciful. Mostly it required violence. The key clanked in the lock as Sakura turned it, leaning back against the door to observe her apartment. The neat bedroll and blanket folded in the corner. Tiny sink and kitchenette scrubbed as clean as she could get. A half-dead plant she always forgot to water balanced on the windowsill. Wilted leaves a pale, sickly green. Sakura's many borrowed library books were stacked haphazardly in a corner. Her loose pages of notes sprawled across the tomes like scattered paper feathers. There was no set genre for her research. The topics as broad and varied as Sakura's own interests. Water release, a rank genjutsu, taijutsu, the list went on. Murmuring a quick prayer to the deities of luck, Sakura flicked on the light switch. Nothing happened. Stable electricity, my ass, I want a refund. Her mood soured even further as the oven refused to light. Sakura resorting to eating cold breakfast leftovers on the rough wooden floor. Furniture was expensive after all. A sound from next door had her pausing mid-bite. No. Please, not again. Loud, sensual moaning. Punctuated by male grunts and the squeaking of bed springs. It's okay, I can deal with this. Oh, Tomura-kun, a female voice keened. The final straw. Will you both shut the fuck up? Sakura yelled out, her teeth lengthening into fangs. Nobody wants to be treated to your auditory ika show, so for the love of every Hokage, take it somewhere else. Silence. Awkward silence radiating from behind her wall gave way to the quiet muttering of agreement. The door opening and closing, harried footsteps sounding down the hallway as the couple left. No doubt to finish what they started. One by one her other neighbors began to speak. A chorus of voices sounding from behind doors, above roofs and even below her floor. You tell them, Pinky. Auditory ika fuck, that's funny. Finally someone told them. Sakura fell asleep, the sound of cheering echoing in her ears. Nay, Sasuke, do you think Kakashi-sensei and Naruto will be much longer? Sasuke, leaning back against a tree with his arms crossed, offered a long-suffering sigh. Probably. Sakura coughed as awkward silence fell. She had yet to apologize to Sasuke. Having never had the opportunity, or the nerve. I want to be a good teammate for him. I need to be. Heart pounding as though she were leaving for war, Sakura turned to face him fully. Fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. Why did it have to be so difficult? Apologizing to Naruto had been effortless. All the words she'd longed to say for weeks falling into easy sentences. With Sasuke it was different. Throat closing up as though she'd swallowed something foul. What could Sakura say to someone she had been obsessed with for years? Followed home and giggled every time he looked her way? How about "I'm sorry, Sasuke"? The boy looked over reluctantly. Sakura interlaced her hands, looking everywhere but at his face. I just wanted to apologize for how I've acted around you. I should have." Her voice hitched and Sakura tried again. "I should have respected your boundaries as a person. Stalking you all those years was wrong," and emerald green eyes met a gaze of dark gray. "I'm sorry." Sasuke's face twitched. "It was wrong," he said coldly. Sakura nodded helplessly. "Though you have apologized." Looked at her and then away again. The entire encounter clearly just as awkward for him. "I shall forgive your past behavior." She smiled. "Thank you. I'll do my best to become a teammate you can rely on." Sakura took was that a word? For agreement, feeling lighter than she had in days. Not even Kakashi-sensei turning up 2 hours late could spoil her good mood. "You're late!" Naruto and Sakura screamed, leaping upright and pointing at their absentee teacher. Kakashi smiled. Gravity-defying silver hair ruffling slightly in the breeze. "Ma, a black cat crossed my path, so I took the long way around." Sakura and the boys shared a furious look, each plotting Kakashi's death. "Speaking of black cats," the man continued, oblivious. "We have a very special mission today." Sakura's face paled in horror. "Please don't say it's Tora." "Nay sensei, we've caught that cat 3 times already. Tabeo." The silver-haired man waved a slip of paper in their faces. The words "D-rank" and "Daimyo's cat" just registering. "Shinobi never complain," he said cheerfully, putting it away with a flourish. "This time we'll split up. Naruto and I versus Sasuke and Sakura. Winners get free lunch." Grabbing Naruto, who squawked in surprise, Kakashi body flickered away. Sakura scuffed at the ground with her shoe. The training ground unbearably quiet without Naruto's chattering. "Let's go to the east end," Sasuke offered. "A lot of catnip grows around there." Sakura desperately wanted to ask how he knew that but held her tongue. "Sounds good to me." The speed of ninja, even genin level, was far greater than civilians and they reached the east end in a matter of minutes. Sakura following Sasuke as they leapt from rooftop to rooftop. The wind rushing in her ears and the sun warm on her skin. Nothing but blurs of speed to those on the street below. Reaching the street they nodded at each other before racing in different directions. Scanning each part of the village for a feline silhouette. "Damn that cat," she panted. Sakura ran the entire block, examining each and every crevice to no avail. No hint of brown fur or a red ribbon. Sasuke caught up with her as she turned into the next neighborhood. "Any sign?" Sakura asked. Heart thundering and lungs burning. Even after months of training she was barely keeping up with Sasuke. The raven-haired boy shook his head. He didn't even look winded. "Right now, I hate him just a little bit." Sakura opened her mouth to suggest they try someplace else when a familiar voice echoed from around the corner. "Koji. I told you not to chew so loud." Ino scolded. Sakura froze, skidding to an abrupt stop and grabbing Sasuke's hand to drag him into a side street. Team 10 came into view an instant later. Ino's signature ponytail swaying as she walked. "We can't let Ino see you," Sakura hissed, realizing she was still holding Sasuke's hand and quickly dropping it. Watching from around the corner as Team 10 bickered. "Her shrill voice will definitely scare away that stupid cat," Sakura muttered, more to herself than anything. Sasuke's lips twitched upwards and she frowned, unused to seeing such an expression. Had she said something funny? "Oi Sakura! Sasuke!" Naruto screamed from a nearby rooftop, waving his arms wildly and pointing. "Tora went that way. Let's get him." Tabeo. "The dope already forgot we're on different teams," Sasuke said incredulously. Naruto running off with an enthusiastic yell. Sakura grinned, watching her friend's spiky blonde hair as he vaulted across buildings. Free lunch for us then. They ran up the wall of the building, using chakra to stick to the brick surface and landing effortlessly on the tiled roofs, making no sound as they followed after their teammate. Sakura squinting against the sunlight glaring off the urban landscape. There, she called out, gesturing to the left where a brown shape had just vanished into an alley, tail flicking around the corner. Cut him off on the other side, Sasuke shouted, leaping down to follow the cat. Sakura forced her legs to move faster, pumping her arms and barely slowing as she jumped the 10 meters down to the ground, using chakra to cushion the impact. The street Tora had turned down was clean and empty. Puddles of fresh water from rain the night before glimmering on the ground like fallen dragon scales. Puddles of water. Sakura started as Sasuke chasing a yowling Tora thundered up the street, the feline managing to stay just out of his reach as the Uchiha cursed. From the speed at which Tora was running, Sakura already knew she could not catch him. Oi team! That cat is mine! Even with both boys pursuing, the feline was gaining speed, heading straight toward Sakura, ribbon trailing in a scrap of red fabric and brown fur bristling in fear. If she didn't do something, Tora would leave the mouth of the alley. What can I do? Sakura thought desperately. Throwing weaponry wouldn't work. The aim was to capture, not maim. As Tora drew closer, Sakura's eyes landed on a nearby puddle and she grinned, hands forming the tiger seal. Sutten, Shugaiden no Jutsu. The puddle rose in a sphere of water, a perfect liquid ball which Sakura sent crashing to the ground, water exploding in all directions like glass fragments. Tora hissed in fright, fur puffing out and claws scrabbling on the stone as he turned tail. Naruto leaping on the struggling cat with a yell of triumph. I got him, Tabeo. Sakura punched the air in victory. Go Team 7! Perched out of sight upon a nearby rooftop, Kakashi tilted his head. Oh! The Jounin murmured, watching his student raise a perfect sphere of water, hands forming the tiger seal as her chakra rippled. His little pink-haired genin knew water release. From her skillfully timed execution of the jutsu, it was clear Sakura had mastered it, using the water to direct the cat into her teammate's path. It was not a question of how she had learned it. Sakura's chakra control had always been admirable, but where? Kakashi puzzled over the answer the entire route to deliver Tora, fighting back a snicker as the cat managed to claw up Naruto's face, bite into Sakura's arm enough to make her scream curses only to relax, purring, in Sasuke's hold. That was so not fair, Sakura said, glowering at Sasuke. Naruto adding a humph of agreement. The hellspawn that was Tora had been stayed serenely curled in Sasuke's arms up until they had returned him. Sakura wincing at the crushing embrace of the woman. No wonder that cat ran away. The Uchiha shrugged. Perhaps he just didn't like you too. Then why did he like you, team? Because I'm not an idiot. What did you say? Sakura sighed as the boys argued in the background. She had been hoping for a productive afternoon. Perhaps some sparring or jutsu practice. Instead, they had chased a cat all morning, and now in the process of returning to training ground 3. Likely to receive another useless, chore-like mission. Kicking a stone, she watched it bounce down the path. By this point Sakura knew better than to hope Kakashi would actually take teaching seriously. But were less D-rank missions really too much to ask for? Right now she'd settle for some peace and quiet. It's a shame you can't breathe underwater. Lakes are so beautifully silent. It's a shame I was born clanless. Kawa hissed in displeasure, scales shifting as he lowered his head to fix her with a stare. It's a shame your self-worth is tied to bloodline alone. Inherited traits do not make a ninja, just as fangs do not make a hunter. Continue to label yourself a mouse, Sakura, and that is all you will ever be. That's not what I... Sakura found herself lost for words. The argument stabbing right into her heart, she had no defense. Naruto and Sasuke became white noise in the background as Sakura fought to puzzle it out. I need to become strong enough that, even without bloodline abilities, I can fight alongside my team. We need more jutsu. More power. I know. Anko had left for an 8-week mission. Nothing but a note pinned to Sakura's front door informing her of the rapid development. That wonderful, crazy, psychopath of a teacher was gone, leaving her all alone. Again. Thoughts and plans wrapped her like spiderwebs, occupying so much of her mind that Sakura's focus clouded to the point she walked straight into Kakashi, bouncing off the iron form of the man with a squeak. Sorry. Kakashi steadied her with a hand on Sakura's shoulder. Ma, Sakura-chan, it's not like you to space out. I was just thinking, she said quickly, stepping back from her teacher and praying his focus would leave her. Such a calculating mind beneath that lazy exterior. She met his gaze and offered an innocent smile. Beneath Sakura's skin, Kawa stirred uneasily. Your wolf-sensei is no prey creature. Wolf? Can you not smell it? Sense it? The Hatake have long been known for bonds with the wolves. Clan traits stemming from Lupin allies. Strong chakra and vicious skills. Curved fangs and canine instincts. The Hatake clan are that strong. Even among us animals, ancient shinobi clan are to be feared. Particularly those that hold such powerful summoning contracts. I've only seen Kakashi-sensei summon dogs, never wolves. Few people have seen me, does that mean I do not exist? Sakura. Blinking back to the world, Sakura allowed the colors and sounds to assault her scenes. She bit her cheek, the dull pain grounding. From his place in the shadow of a tree, Kakashi-sensei faced the genin, offering a signature ice smile as he stuffed both hands into his pockets. Considering you three did such a good job on recapturing Tora, I've decided to take a C-rank mission. Pulling a document from within his flak jacket, her sensei smiled again. Pack your bags. We leave for the hidden waterfall village tomorrow. Chapter 10, The Village Hidden by a Waterfall to Kigakure. Sakura skipped along the path beside her companions, unable to wipe the smile from her face. The knowledge they had finally taken up a good mission filling her with excitement. Although she was cheerful, all of Sakura's senses remained on high alert, scanning the forest shadows and shrubbery for potential threats. Broad trunks reaching high overhead as they walked underneath. Dappled patches of light falling from the canopy like discarded leaves. The memory of what happened last time still haunted her. Sakura's guilt eating at her like starving wolves. Rika's terrified face screaming accusations in her dreams. It's your fault I died. Your fault. Your mistake. Sakura took a deep breath, clenching her hands into fists. Never again. I will not fail this. I will not fail them. My sweet cherry blossom, no one can predict the future. The snake tilted his head, sapphire eyes and slitted pupils gleaming with intelligence. But Kawa's tongue flickered as though tasting her sincerity. I have faith in your strength. A lump caught in Sakura's throat. No one had ever said that to her before. Thank you. The forest thinned out slightly. From high above, Sakura watched an eagle dive, a piercing hunting cry erupting from its beak. The man walking beside Team 7 let out a scream at the sight, ducking behind Sakura to curl into a terrified ball, his shaking hands clenching into the back of her shirt as the bird swooped overhead. The genin resisted the urge to roll her eyes. This was to become the next chief of the waterfall village? The man they had been tasked with escorting back to Kigakure? The previous leader had died in undisclosed circumstances, leaving Shivuki as heir to the village. With long brown hair and large, startled eyes, he reminded Sakura more of a deer than a skilled shinobi. His personality was not far off one either. It was just a bird, Naruto said, scratching his cheek in bemusement as the quivering man stood to his feet, still hiding behind Sakura. I know what it was, he yelled back. The Leaf Village ninja shared a look of disbelief. Was he for real? Sakura turned to the man once more, crouched at her feet as he gazed in all directions. A meek prey animal trapped in the woods. As though at any moment he expected a predator to strike. How this nervous Nelly could ever hope to lead a village is beyond me. When Shivuki finally calmed down enough to continue the trek, Sakura exhaled in relief. Likely they would have reached Kigakure hours ago, if not for the village chief screaming at every tiny sound. Gradually the landscape changed. Trees giving way to rough earth and then to stone. The forest falling away behind them as the sun continued to blaze overhead. A faint roaring could be heard in the distance. Gradually getting louder the closer they drew. The stones widened in diameter, stretching to the size of dinner plates beneath their feet. Footsteps nothing but small raindrops against the dull roar of the waterfall. Sakura was expecting it to be large. Yet as the path ended in a sheer cliff and they stopped at the edge, she wasn't expecting this. A vast blue lake stretched into the distance. Huge pillars of rock breaking through the surface like ragged teeth. A fine cloud of mist, kicked up from the spray of the water, hung over the valley, leaving parts of it shrouded in white. The air smelled clean and fresh, pleasantly cool against her skin. The waterfall of Takigakuer was vast, pouring down the rocky slope of a gigantic mountain like a stream of blue blood. Easily twice the height of Konoha's Great Wall and just as impressive. Sakura craned her neck upwards, unable to see the top for it was lost in a haze of water vapor. The thundering avalanche of water cascaded down with impressive power. This close the sound was all but deafening, like triumphant call of some great beast announcing the entrance to Takigakuer. Now that's what I call a waterfall, Naruto stated in amazement. Yes, quite impressive isn't it, Kakashi said languidly, I take it that means we've arrived. Sakura smiled. The dark paranoia that had clung to her since leaving Konoha lifting. We've made it to the village without a hitch. Mission accomplished. Taking another moment to simply enjoy the view, Sakura turned from the sight. Kakashi's taller stature provided an excellent vantage point as they began to descend from the cliff. Spiky silver hair a beacon. The narrow path leading down to the lakefront was treacherous. Rocks slick with moisture rolling beneath her feet only to fall into the water far, far below. Sakura almost lost her balance once or twice. Relived that, unlike Shibuki, she didn't cry in the process. Sakura couldn't help feeling relieved as they reached solid, flat ground. The lake, just 2 meters away, lapping quietly at the shore. Wo Naruto murmured, gazing at the enormous curtain of water that fell with unceasing intensity from the mountain above. Team 7's attention was drawn from the waterfall as giggling children ran from the forest, crowing in delight at the sight of Lord Shibuki. A little girl who could not have been older than 6 giggled. The boy at her side beaming up at the man. Now he chastised. Waving a hand imperiously, show a little respect for your village leader. Sakura had to place a hand over her mouth to stifle her giggles, turning her back to the group as her body shook with the effort. Kakashi offered an amused tilt of his head. These ninja have come from the Hidden Leaf Village, Shibuki was saying. Naruto's face screwed up with indignant anger. Hey! Do we look like garbage men to you? The blonde glared at Shibuki, crossing his arms and adopting a stance of utter refusal. You gotta be crazy. Sakura and Sasuke watched as he continued to argue. But needling voices of the kids were already breaking his composure. The current at the edge can be pretty scary. The little boy chimed in. Naruto threw a helpless look over Sakura's head. Kakashi-sensei, he begged. Sakura felt her shoulders slump. Kakashi was too much of a sadist to refuse. Of course this uneventful mission would end in garbage collection. Oh, why not, Kakashi said smoothly, we'd be glad to help. Of course, this will be in addition to our escort fee. Shibuki nodded enthusiastically even as Sakura and Naruto glared at the jounin. So? Sasuke said, biting the edge of his lip in annoyance, our bodyguard duty is over. Yup. I'm home now, safe and sound. Sakura rubbed her arm. Old memories leaving chills through her body. Rika never made it back to Konoha. She died scared and alone, trapped upon a table of blood, and I couldn't save her. Shibuki was saying something else, though his words felt lost to the waterfall. Nothing other than its harsh roaring making its way into Sakura's head. Okay then, Kakashi stated. Sakura grabbing onto his voice like a lifeline. I'm here. I'm outside in sunlight and I'm safe. Everyone is safe. Time to begin phase 2 of the mission. The jounin sounded far too cheerful. Naruto groaned. It might not actually be a bad idea to stick around for a while. Kakashi lounged on a nearby boulder, the vivid red cover of his newest Ika making far too tempting a target. I wonder if Suten, Shugaiden could shred paper. Sakura thought mutinously as she picked up a soda can. feet leaving ripples across the water as she strode over the surface. Chakra expertly supporting her weight even as the village kids waded up to their knees in the muck. It most certainly could. There's been indications that some rogue ninja may have certain plans for your village. Sakura's ears pricked at the news. Kakashi's voice carrying over to where she worked. The boys remaining oblivious. It took every ounce of willpower to appear uninterested as she listened in on the conversation. Body occupied with collecting rubbish even as her mind remained alert. There are always rumors like that going around, Shivuki said hotly. Craning his neck to peer over Kakashi's shoulder. Is he trying to read Ika Ika? Ew. Come to think of it, your father once had to fight off a bunch of troublemakers like that, didn't he? A shadow crossed Shivuki's face. Eyes darkening as he considered the question. Whatever response he began to vocalize morphed into a scream of fear as a hawk swooped down from the sky. Its wingtips ruffling Shivuki's hair as it flew past. Sakura rolled her eyes. What is it with this man and birds? They are quite terrifying. You carry the chakra of a Baijuya. And yet I remain a snake. Reptiles have many avian predators. I appreciate the biology lesson, but it really doesn't apply here. Kakashi held out an arm. The hawk landing neatly with a flutter of feathers. Not to worry, he said calmly. Reaching for the paper tied to the bird's leg. It's just a messenger from the Hidden Leaf Village. Air mail, special delivery. Unfurling the note, Sakura watched his eye rove over the characters. Someone's looking for me, the Jounin announced thoughtfully. Does this mean you're leaving? Shivuki asked. Folding the note carefully inside his jacket pocket, Kakashi nodded. Afraid so, but don't worry, the others can stay and finish the cleanup. Sakura felt him turn away from Shivuki to look at them. Hey. Guys. I hate to miss out on the fun, but I've got to get back to the village. Huh? Did something happen? Naruto asked. They've called an emergency session of the Jounin Council. You'll all follow as soon as you're done here. Got it, Sasuke said. They can go now if they want. I think the future Hokage can handle this by myself. Sakura threw her trash into the bag with slightly more force than necessary. Naruto's voice grating on already frayed nerves. Please say yes. She silently begged Kakashi. I would happily let someone else collect lake garbage. The Jounin regarded Naruto from his place on the slope. Yeah, right, he said dubiously. Reaching down with one arm to grab his pack whilst the hawk perched imperiously on the other. I'll see you all soon. Kakashi tossed the bird into the air and Sakura watched it take flight. Wings beating against the pull of gravity. The veins of each feather, outlined by the sun, seemed awfully delicate to carry it so high. Sakura couldn't help a pang of envy as she watched it spiral into the sky. A tiny brown speck amidst an azure void. If only I could fly. Sakura looked to the place where Kakashi had stood, but the Jounin had long since vanished. Grabbing a rusted soft drink can, she did her best to tune out Naruto's yelling. Was he seriously arguing with kids? Shivuki is a real hero. The girl yelled. Tiny face screwed up in anger. Sakura turned away to hide her laugh. She had to agree with Naruto. Shivuki was definitely not Hokage material. The village child, propelled by fury, ran forward to push Naruto with surprising strength. Sakura watched with interest as he stumbled forward. Where was that unshakable shinobi balance? Ack! Dog cootie! Naruto screamed. Flailing around in a desperate attempt to shake something foul-smelling from his foot. What a loser, Sasuke muttered. Brow furrowed in disgust. Sakura giggled. Such an idiot. Are you sure this is the best place to attack from Master Suien? Their weakest point? A male shinobi asked. The question directed towards an older man who was clearly the leader. Don't worry, Master Suien spoke in a voice coarse from disuse. Barely looking up from the blade he was sharpening. The steel surface dark and dull, as though hungry for blood. Trust me. Don't forget that I was a Jounin in this village for many years. The first man to speak, a white-haired ninja with a tattoo styled horizontally across his face, laughed. The sound chipped and ragged. A lame horse stumbling over an uneven road. Amusement distorted with bloodlust. Let's get started. Suyen glanced up at the crowd of 20 or so ninja of all races and backgrounds watching with hungry eyes. "Control yourselves," he said darkly. "I want all killing kept to a minimum." "Yes, sir." A slender shinobi dressed all in black hissed. Mocking tone clearly audible. A bird called loudly from above and everyone froze. The preternatural stillness of trained killers. Paranoia made worse by the fact that everything hinged on the element of surprise. "Still have sentimental feelings for the old place, eh?" the white-haired man asked after minutes of silence. Suyen gritted his teeth. Faintly wrinkled hands clenching out the blade. "It's not that, you fool. The only one who knows where the hero's water is hidden is Shivuki, Takigaku's so-called leader." Assembled shinobi shared confused glances. Each too afraid to ask the obvious question. "Why must we spare the villagers?" A red-haired female tapped a scarlet nail against her lip. Voice serenely beautiful, like bells ringing in perfect harmony as she puzzled out the answer. "In order to make Shivuki talk, we'll need to take the villagers as hostages." Alive, the nail dropped from her mouth as she smiled. Ruby lips curling upwards. The headband of the Hidden Rain village tied proudly around her waist like some private joke. The slash line as crude as she was composed. "They always said you were the cleverest in Hidden Rain village, Hisami," Suyen said in admiration. Hisami crossed her arms. A smug smile dancing in her gaze. "That was a long time ago. Now I'm just like you, a rogue ninja without a home." The slender ninja shifted from one foot to the other. "Whatever," he muttered impatiently. Body thrumming with repressed energy as he glanced from the view of the waterfall back to the gathered rogue nin. "Now can we get out there and grab this thing, or are we gonna sit and reminisce all day?" Suyen got to his feet with a sigh. Waving a hand to the 20 silent figures perched in close proximity. They vanished without a sound. The remaining rogue nin eyed each other with anticipation. Greed and desire, a common tie binding their hearts. The hero's water, that mystical, powerful entity capable of granting unheard-of power, was finally within reach. "You were a fool, Hisan. Your worthless son cannot stop me." "Nothing can." Suyen nodded to the others. "Let's get started." "Wait. Sasuke!" Sakura shouted as she ran over. Leaving Shivuki and Naruto to argue over the semantics of their completed mission. "The secret entrance to Takigaku must be somewhere close by," Sasuke said the moment they were out of earshot. Sakura looked back. Noting Shivuki's tensed shoulders and pained expression. Too instinctual a reaction to be from Naruto's yelling, even as the blonde gestured wildly to the piles of collected garbage, ranting about being ungrateful. Shivuki seemed to look straight through him. Eyes darting reflexively towards the waterfall and then away. As though seeking to protect something nobody else could see. "Fine." Naruto's voice was uncharacteristically taut as he stomped towards Sakura. "That's just fine, it'll be a pleasure." Teeth gritted, he continued past her, looking nowhere but straight ahead. "Come on guys, let's leave this dump." Sakura waved a hand in goodbye, turning to follow her companion. Sasuke falling into place at her side. If he was unbothered by the rough treatment he didn't let on. Then again, I suppose he's had to deal with far worse over the course of... "Stop." Kawa's voice came so abruptly Sakura froze. The snake's vast body coiling nervously. Head turning as his tongue flickered. A rich, iron scent assaulted her nose a moment later. Human pain, fear, and terror layered around it. Sakura scanned the forest greenery but could detect nothing. The rustling of leaves and the creaking of branches hiding danger she knew existed. One hand clutched her kunai. Body unconsciously shifting into a defensive stance. Hairs rose on the back of her neck as uneven footsteps became audible. Scraping and stumbling through the forest. The stench of blood snapping like a red dog around their ankles. Sakura's eyes widened. "There's someone dash. Mother." The girl screamed the word with none of the usual childish joy. Instead it was laced with panic. Enough so that all the genin turned. Watching a woman stumbling from the forest. Arms hanging like dead weights at her side. "Lord, Shivuki," she croaked. Pausing on trembling legs to raise an arm towards him. The leader of her village. The man upon whom hundreds dependent. Nothing but a meat deer in a forest of wolves. Sakura watched the unfurling scene with dread. They attacked, without warning. Breaths came slowly and unsteady before the woman fell, hitting the ground face down before anyone could stop her. The kunai embedded into her back, surrounded by a small pool of blood. Sakura rushed to her side, examining the angle of the weapon, the flow of the blood. This close, the iron/sweat smell was overpowering. Shaking her head to clear it of her growing panic, Sakura placed 2 fingers against the woman's wrist, noting after several moments the strong, steady beat of her heart. "It's not too bad," she finally announced. But she had lost consciousness. "This is bad." The little body spoke in a squeaky voice, his body trembling like a fallen leaf. "We've gotta go to village right away." No, Sasuke cut in coldly. "That wouldn't be a smart idea." She said they attacked without warning. Sakura offered what she hoped was a reassuring smile. "Meaning we don't know where the enemy is, so it wouldn't be safe to return to someplace unprotected like the village. How could anyone even find us?" "It should be impossible." Shivuki's voice was harried, incredulousness warring with panic as he grappled with the situation. 3 Leaf Genin. 1 injured civilian. 2 children. Unknown numbers of enemies. Hidden location of the village? Compromised. Takigakuya relies so much on camouflage, their defenses must be seriously lacking. A mouse in a hole can hide for only so long. Sakura. She glanced up at the sound of her name. "Take the children and the woman away. Find a safe place to take care of her." Sakura delivered the instructions with impeccable calm, responding rapidly and quickly to the unknown situation. A model shinobi. From a logistical standpoint, it wasn't a bad move. Yet it made Sakura see red. How dare he relegate her to the sidelines like that? Nobody knew how many enemies they faced. To reduce capable fighters from 3 to 2 so quickly? He has no faith in my abilities whatsoever. Sakura's fist clenched, tendons standing out in stark relief. That chakra, the other, foreign chakra, stirred, sparking and burning as her emotions grew. Blue and red, red and blue. 2 parts of the same whole. "No," Sakura growled out, standing to her full height to face Sasuke. "We cannot reduce our combative power. I know you think I'm totally useless, but that's simply wrong. Naruto needs someone to watch his back." And her breath caught and Sasuke blinked, an uncharacteristic expression of surprise holding his face captive. Gray eyes wide and mouth slightly open. "And so do you," Sakura finished. "Have Naruto make a shadow clone and Shivuki can direct them all to a safe place. He knows the land better than us, and should anything destroy the clone, Naruto will be aware the kids are in danger." Tightening her headband, Sakura turned away from Sasuke, uninterested in watching the mental battle he was fighting. Probably struggling to process that she, Sakura of all people, would stand up to him. She didn't care. Eventually he would reach the conclusion that her plan made better sense. And besides, it felt good to vocalize her true opinions for once. To be taken as part of the team and not just the token female. Respect in the shinobi world had to be earned. And she wasn't going to receive any hiding in a cave with civilians. Besides, Sakura thought with a small twinge of excitement, our enemies are likely rogue ninjas, and I have more than a few bones to pick with their kind. Amaki had hired many after all. Slashes and cuts where proud village symbols once stood. Walking symbols of betrayal. Loyalty to the village and one another replaced by greed. Money. Wealth. Power. A poison that delivered the sweetest honey. Tortured men, women, and children fading to insignificance beside the paycheck Amaki offered. Sakura hated them all. Great idea, Sakura. My clone will keep them safe. Tabeo. Naruto punched the air in excitement. A soft poof sounding as a clone joined his antiques. Both of them quickly quietening as Shivuki began to explain the best hiding spots. Tracing a map in the sand with one finger. Granules sticking to sweat-covered skin as he worked. The rapid beating of his heart all but audible. I really hope there's only a few. Dear San over here could perhaps handle an angry toddler. We still need to know where the village is, Sasuke interjected. Takigakuya is certainly the target and we need to be able to protect it. Shivuki brushed the sand from his palms. Oh, you will, huh? The words were hostile, matched with the distrusting and angry way his body movements shifted. Offensive to defensive and back again. I'd like to see that. How could you ever help us anyway? Movement from within the waterfall caught her eye. Dark silhouettes leaping outwards. Sakura barely had time to throw herself out of range. Sasuke tackling Naruto and Shivuki, the three tumbling along the ground. Thank the gods Naruto's shadow clone left with the others. What the heck was that for? Naruto shouted. Stay down, Sasuke replied. If he felt any surprise when Sakura joined him a heartbeat later, the Uchiha said nothing. Steely gaze fixed on the approaching danger. Four ninja burst from the waterfall in a shower of glittering droplets. Arms and legs cocked for perfect balance. Let's finish this, the leader shouted. Manic delight causing the blue tattoo across his face to waver, lines twisting into curves. As one, the enemy nin launched a barrage of kunao. The pink and black-haired genin stood side by side, hands going through two very different movements. Demon Wind Shuriken. Sasuke shouted, the enormous retractable blade flying from his hand. The edge skimming the surface of the water to release a shower of spray before it circled upwards, colliding with the kunao to knock the majority from the sky. Sutin, Water Fang Bullet. Hardened spheres of water rotating as fast as Sakura could get them flung themselves towards the enemy nin, hitting two straight in the stomach before they had time to react. Sasuke's blade hit the third, leaving nasty slice along his abdomen. The trail of blood, a red ribbon the shinobi left behind as he plummeted into the water. A terrified scream from one of his companions cut short as Sakura clenched her fist, sending the two rogue nin down to join their teammate. The final shinobi, the leader, landed neatly on one of the many boulders resting at the base of the waterfall. Clothes still neat and white hair unblemished. He did not so much as glance towards the felled men. The shinobi looked first at the genin and then at Shivuki, baring his teeth in a grin. So you've got help, huh? The question was directed towards Shivuki and dripping with enough malicious intent to make Sakura flinch. Halfway through her second tiger seal, the shinobi disappeared, leaping from the boulder and out of sight. The roar of the waterfall and the screen it provided effectively masking his trail. Got all but one, Sasuke muttered, sounding furious with himself. Sakura offered a sympathetic shrug, wishing she could say more but knowing Sasuke wouldn't appreciate it. What right did she have to comfort him? Sakura had also missed that final shinobi. Shivuki was curled into a quivering ball, face pressed to the ground, sobbing breaths racking his frame. The acrid taste of fear was potent on Sakura's tongue and she grimaced, watching Naruto lay a hand on the man's shoulder. He flinched, straightening up with an embarrassed expression. Shivuki? Naruto asked cautiously. Oh, his nothing, the man waved a hand, clearly fighting for a confidence he didn't feel. I was just excited, that's all. Sakura raised a brow. Because that's certainly what excitement looks like. Sasuke stepped onto the shore, steely-eyed gaze fixed on the village leader. The look he assumed with risk and calculation was at the forefront of his mind, responding to sudden changes in the mission as smoothly as a bird in flight. Now that we're in this, we're gonna see it through to the end. It's a new mission, the Uchiha announced. Yo, that's right, a whole new mission. Nothing like combat practice, right guys? She rolled her eyes at Naruto's antics. Of course he wouldn't be even slightly afraid at facing an unknown number of trained, dangerous shinobi. Even so, fighting was thrilling in a way nothing else seemed to match. Exciting despite the danger. Or because of it. Nothing like combat practice, Sakura echoed. Sasuke crouched down on one knee until he was eye level with Shivuki, fixing the man with a terrifyingly focused stare that made him tremble. Now one hand fisted in Shivuki's collar, pulling him closet until their faces were only inches apart. Show us the way to the Kigakuer. These natural surroundings have served as a barrier, protecting our village from most of our enemies. Sakura listened to Shivuki's explanation with curiosity, unable to voice even half the questions brewing in her mind due to the treacherous nature of the climb. Shivuki had led them to a small path along the mountain, a rugged, uphill trek covered in rocks slick from the waterfall. This close the sound was deafening. The endless sheet of water almost close enough to reach out and touch. Sakura resolutely did not look down, keeping her eyes glued to her feet as she trailed after the boys. Eventually the path straightened out. The stone are arrowing down to a fine point. A rocky hand just shy of touching the waterfall. Standing beside Sasuke and Naruto, Sakura watched her distorted pink reflection in the water, broken and remade hundreds of times as new drops flew past. The only way in is through the waterfall, Shibuki stated as he stopped on Sakura's left. Her heart dropped. They had to go through that? Is there really an entrance down there? Sasuke asked. Shibuki pushed ahead of the group, turning back to fix them all with a surprisingly stern glare. Let me make one thing clear. You must never reveal the secret entrance to anybody. Yeah, we get it already. Naruto snapped. Just show us the way in. Shibuki paused a moment longer, fine droplets catching on his brown hair as he considered. Eventually he turned, tapping out a complex pattern on the stone so fast they could not hope to replicate it. A rumbling sound filled the air, the vibrations trembling up their legs as a portion of the cliff slid back, revealing a mountain path leading into the gloom. Sakura tried to swallow even as her throat went dry, memories crashing against her brain like ocean waves. No. Why did it have to be underground? Kawa shared her fear, his pupils contracting. Both of them hesitated at the entrance to the mountain, unable to make that final, treacherous step. Sakura, are you coming? Sasuke regarded her from inside the secret entrance, already sounding impatient as the others paused to hear her answer. Sakura wanted so say yes, wanted so desperately to make her body obey, yet it refused to listen. Stuck fast as though she had planted roots. Underground there was nothing. Nothing but darkness and wretched, awful memories. No sunlight or air. Nothing to remind her that warmth existed, that she had really been rescued and it hadn't all been a dream. Under the earth where darkness lived, a Maka's ghost haunting the caverns, stalking her psyche with his trademark laugh. All too ready to tease her fear. Could she really go through it all again? I'm too weak. I can't. Naruto's head peeked over Sasuke's shoulder. Don't worry Sakura, I'll protect you. Tabeo. Before she could second guess the decision, Sakura threw herself forwards on impulse, stumbling into the passageway on unsteady legs. The moment she was through, the entrance sealed. A wall of stone rising from the floor with a decisive clang. With the absence of natural light, everything seemed smaller. The faint glow from somewhere up ahead throwing the cave passage into perpetual twilight. We should hurry, Sakura choked out, the rising sensation of claustrophobia and fear making it hard to speak. The sooner they got out of here, the better. The passage curved sharply to the right, widening to a large cavern. Stalactites lining the roof like shark teeth. Enormous pools of turquoise water lay scattered, emitting a soft green glow. Sakura and the others quickly ducked behind a large rock, all senses attuned to potential enemies. Careful Naruto, watch yourself, Sasuke warned. Funny, the blonde growled, I was just about to say the same thing to you. Would both of you shut up, Sakura hissed, fingers itching towards her weapons. Talking is the opposite of stealth. To her relief they both fell silent, the sudden quiet oppressive. Sakura fought to control her breathing as the air turned heavy, the walls seeming to close in around her until she couldn't get out, couldn't breathe. Why is it so dark? I can't. I'm not sensing an enemy presence, Sasuke said, straightening up from his defensive position and nodding to Shibuki, who removed his hands from Sasuke's shirt. Sakura watched with interest as the Dakigakuer leader strode towards the largest pool. This way, he called out, arms stretching into a perfect diving form as he leaped into the green depths. Not so much as a breath of hesitation. The three genin glanced at each other, looking back to the bubbles still rising to the surface. I don't know, Naruto began hesitantly. Sakura snorted. Like we really have a choice. Before either of the boys could say anything, she dove in after Shibuki, the cold hitting her system like a punch to the gut. Freezing water all but stabbing into her limbs. Forcing herself to ignore the sensation, Sakura swam down, each stroke leaving a wave of chills up her arms. The pool led directly downwards, and to Sakura it felt akin to swimming into the earth. Nothing but rock on all sides and that mysterious green light. Still, anything beat remaining in that cave, and water was comforting in its own strange way. That perhaps is my doing, I am a river snake after all. You'd think I would receive more benefits from that. Sakura kicked her legs harder as her lungs tightened. Kawa's tail flicked. Ungrateful brat. Abruptly the tunnel of water curved upwards. Relief rushing through her system as the water surface came into view. Surface rippling with reflected sunlight in a hazy image of the world above. She broke the surface a moment later. Breathing quietly and deeply. Resisting the urge to inhale faster. Such sounds would be a dead giveaway after all. Naruto and Sasuke emerged moments later, both of them impressively silent. Oi guys, Naruto waited until they had both paddled over to him. My shadow clone was dispersed, he whispered urgently. Sakura felt a flicker of dread and Sasuke's eyes tightened. The kids? Shibuki asked urgently. Naruto shook his head. I don't know, he said helplessly. Don't worry, Sakura tried to sound reassuring. If they've been captured, we'll rescue them, she offered Shibuki a reassuring smile. We are shinobi, after all. After a heartbeat he nodded. Right. They all made to swim for the shore and Sakura froze, overwhelmed by the sight that greeted her. An enormous tree grew from an island within lake. The land encircling it covered with village houses. Not even the tallest of which managed to reach its lowest root. Even if Sakura craned her neck upwards she was barely able to see the canopy. The trunk thicker than the Hokage's residence and taller than 10 castles stacked atop one another. To summarize, it was a giant fucking tree. Whoa, Naruto said in awe as they stepped onto the shore. Wringing water from sopping wet clothes. No wonder you keep this place hidden, Sakura examined the wooden buildings with interest. Noting the clean, orderly nature of the village. Not a single door or window askew. It was so quiet, Naruto seemed even louder than usual as he rambled. Something's not right, Shibuki said. Sakura finally realized what was bugging her. The village was deserted. Shibuki's eyes widened and he dove back into the lake. Disappearing in a flurry of bubbles. Before Sakura could say a word, hands shoved into her side, sending her tumbling into the water to be joined a second later by Naruto. Hey, what's the big idea? He spluttered after resurfacing. Eyeing Sasuke in irritation. The Uchiha barely reacted from his place on the shore. Jaw tense and weapon in hand. Find Shibuki and get him to safety while I hold these guys off, the order left his mouth in a rush. 3 shinobi bursting from cover to launch themselves at Sasuke. Sakura didn't hesitate. Let's go. She hissed to Naruto. Grabbing his hand and diving down. Sasuke could handle 3 men. They would only get in his way, and besides, if Shibuki died, Takigakure would be lost. The underwater world felt like a dream compared to the chaos above. No sound but her own beating heart. Sakura's vision filled with bubbles and blue-green light. Distorted sunlight filtered down. Flickering in the water movements like golden seaweed. The lake was vast. A yawning black hole lay beneath them, water cold and dark. Sunlight unable to penetrate the inky depths. Desperately Sakura searched for Shibuki. Eyes struggling to see through the gloom as she and Naruto swam deeper. Sakura kicking her legs, hoping Sasuke was okay even as they swam further and further away from him. If she only had some way of tracking Shibuki, this whole process would be so much easier. Sakura felt her stomach clench. Oh. I'm an actual idiot. Kicking for the surface, she inhaled a breath of air before diving again. The world turning gray and white as she looked for heat signatures. Aside from Naruto's glowing red form, the lake appeared empty. In all directions, frustratingly empty. Eyes narrowed, Sakura rotated her head. Intent on finding even some small hint of where Shibuki had vanished to. There. A minuscule red speck, just close enough to draw her attention. Tapping Naruto's shoulder, she pointed straight ahead. Relieved when he seemed to understand. Together they towards Shibuki, Naruto blindly following in Sakura's wake. His instant trust in her judgment leaving a warm, fuzzy feeling behind. The Leaf Shinobi closed the gap in little time. Shibuki growing in size as they approached. The creases of his clothes and the loose, brown strands of his hair coming into focus. The single focal point in the entirety of the lake. Nothing below them but yawning blackness. Abruptly he put on a burst of speed. Body angling upwards only to disappear. Sakura frowned. Her lungs screamed for air but she ignored the sensation. Unwilling to risk losing Shivuki again. Her and Naruto, upon reaching the place he had disappeared, did their best to replicate Shivuki's movements. Swimming upwards, the greenish glow getting brighter as they broke through the water. Sucking in oxygen, Sakura brushed hair from her eyes. Gazing in awe at the hidden cave they had emerged within. One made entirely from the tree itself. Roots curling and arcing over themselves, twisting into knots that reminded her of ramen noodles. I've spent too much time with Naruto. Enormous roots thick as pillars arched down from the roof overhead, leaching into the water like industrial pipes. The cavern was lit with a turquoise glow. Likely the result of sunlight filtering through leaves high above. Tucked into the very back of the cave sat a small shrine. Its wooden surface painted a crimson red. Shivuki staggered up the small hill towards one Sakura originally thought to be made of dirt. Upon closer inspection she realized it was comprised entirely of tree roots. Threaded together so tightly not a single gap could be found. Naruto swam to her side and together they ducked behind a tree root. Peering up at the shrine as Shivuki walked towards it. Movements purposeful. The shrine doors creaked open and he paused. Shivuki's figure blocking Sakura's view of what lay within. Naruto craning his neck to the left in a desperate attempt to see past Shivuki. Blonde hair tickling Sakura's nose. She sneezed. The sound echoing. Bouncing off the walls like a ping-pong ball. To her surprise Shivuki didn't scream. Instead he tucked something white and reflective into his shirt before leaping upwards. Running up the cave wall and vanishing into the shadows. After him. Sakura hissed out. Words urgent. As the rest of Team 7 chased after Shivuki, Sasuke was just waking up. Groaning as he returned to consciousness. Lingering pain still crackling along his limbs. And head aching fiercely. Through bleary eyes he surveyed the surroundings. Taking an embarrassingly long time to realize, from the faint swaying sensation and the ache in his wrists, that he was suspended above the ground. The Uchiha tugged experimentally at the restraints. Grimacing as the rope instantly tightening. Digging into his arms hard enough to break the skin. Warm blood dripping onto the ground below. Men, women, and children sat bound beneath him. Groups of them scattered around like flocks of sheep. Each of them guarded by unknown shinobi. Crying or whimpering in terror as they were prodded with sharp weapons. Sasuke wriggled again. Thrashing against the restraints only to stop with a gasp of pain as it constricted. He was trapped. Hung like poultry ready for plucking. Shinobi stationed everywhere he looked. To his intense relief there was no sign of Sakura, Naruto, or Shivuki. If they were smart they would retreat immediately. There are far too many enemies for those idiots to handle. Sasuke watched as more of his blood spattered against the ground. Of course, idiots will never make the right decisions. Perched upside down on the roof of Shivuki's hiding place, Sakura and Naruto watched the man as he fumbled with the glass container. The vast tree was littered with tunnels. An entire hidden catacomb, curving like termite pathways through the wood. Sunlight flooded in from the roughly circular opening which overlooked the ground below. Sakura uncurled from the roof, directing the chakra to her fingertips before dropping silently onto her feet. Moving cautiously towards the opening, Sakura braced her body against the edge of the gap. Keeping as still as possible as she cautiously peered out. Naruto dropped to the ground. His cheerful hey, drowned out by Shivuki's scream. Sakura winced. Could they at least try to be stealthy? Taking a deep breath she focused on the scene below. Willing herself to remain calm even at the sight of the bound villagers. Rogue shinobi standing guard like shepherds over a reluctant flock. One hand dug into the tree. Wood flaking beneath her fingernails as Sakura clawed at the surface. Teeth lengthening as rage and reason fought for dominance. A red torii gate stood in the middle of the clearing. Placed in front of a small shrine. Movement between the pillars caught her eye and Sakura squinted. Leaning as close as she dared. Why did that black hair look familiar? Her stomach twisted. Sasuke. It was Sasuke suspended from the gate. Hot anger filled her at the sight. How dare they hang her teammate up like some kind of gruesome trophy? The girl watched the gathered shinobi hungrily. Slitted reptilian pupils fixated on every movement. Lengthened canines baring as she listened to the wailing of the villagers. I want to kill them. I want to make those traitors scream. A village man began to sob, begging the guards surrounding him to let them go. Please, I'll give you all I have. Shut up. A rogue nin snapped, his voice carrying on the wind. Grabbing the man by the collar, he swung a powerful punch into his jaw, the impact knocking his head backwards, dropping the unconscious villager with a snicker. That's enough, Kiri-same, a man called sternly, the gray coat he wore billowing in the wind as he strode from the gate towards Kiri-same, barely sparing a glance to the genin suspended above. Noticeably older than the rest, he walked with a confidence that made it clear he was the leader. Suien Shivuki's face was twisted in horror as he stared down at the scene. You lead them here? Why, Suien? One of the villagers called, sounding just as confused as the man by Sakura's side. You were once our most respected shinobi. Another chimed in, how could you betray us this way? Are you planning on taking over the village? Accusations and disbelief rose in a deafening chorus until Suien held up a hand. Everyone falling silent. No, he snorted in derision. What would I want with this pathetic collection of huts? Glancing up at Sasuke, he offered a yellow-toothed grin. No, I've come for something much more valuable. Suien faced the village once more, throwing out his arms in a brutal mockery of a welcome. I've come for the hero's water. He announced the words so loudly they rang in the air, shimmering as though trapped, poison raindrops in a delicate spider web. By her side, Shivuki stiffened. Clearly, that statement meant something to him. Mostly certainly it's something dire. When is it not? You're insane. A civilian yelled, voice impressively steady for one bound on his knees. Do you really think Lord Shivuki will just hand it over? He'd pour it all out on the ground before he'd let out have it. Suien laughed. If he were a different sort of village leader he might do something like that, yes. But you forget, I was his teacher, I know Lord Shivuki better than anyone. Who is that guy? Naruto asked over Shivuki's shoulder. The Lord screamed, sprinting into the back of their hiding place to crouch, trembling in the shadows. Peering out at them from the gloom, his large eyes shone. Suien used to be a jounin in the village, he murmured, tracing patterns onto the wooden floor. Used to be, Sakura echoed, hatred digging needle-sharp points into her soul. Kawa lashing his tail angrily across the lake in her mind. Water splashing in all directions. So he's a rouge ninja. Sakura spat the question, Shivuki nodding miserably. Hey Shivuki. Suien called from below. I know you can hear me. Come out from wherever you are hiding. Bring me the hero's water. The Lord reached into his pocket, withdrawing glass bottle filled with liquid. Clutching it in both hands he rocked back and forth, shaking and stuttering nonsense sentences. Sakura glanced at the entrance and back. What should they do? What could they do? It was evident that water Shivuki held was not ordinary. Whatever power it granted could not be allowed to fall into the hands of rogue ninja. And yet, at the same time the entire village had been taken hostage. Sasuke was completely immobilized and Sakura had no idea what kind of skills the enemy shinobi had. Logically, their best course of action would be to remain hidden. Fool Suien into thinking Shivuki had won away and then pick of the rogue nin from the shadows. Hit and run cowardly execution, 2/3 of a genin team style. An apt title. Making sure the hero's water is protected is the most sacred job of a village leader, Shivuki said quietly, brushing a thumb the glass as though it were the most precious thing in the world. To him it probably is. It just looks like a jug of water, Naruto said. But it is. This water is drawn from the trunk of the sacred tree only once every 100 years. Whoever drinks it increases their chakra by 10-fold, maybe even more. Tenfold. The shocked disbelief in Naruto's voice mirrored Sakura's own. What would it be like, to gain that much power? Looking at the water with new eyes, Sakura couldn't deny she felt tempted. It would be so easy to disarm him. to take it for herself. There are no shinobi in our village as strong as your Hokage, Shivuki continued, oblivious. So in times of trouble we've had to rely on the hero's water to defend ourselves. In the last Great War, the water was the only thing that saved us from destruction. He exhaled a shuddering breath. But the hero's water exacts a terrible price. Whoever drinks it has his life shortened by the same degree to which his chakra was increased. Many of our shinobi died not in battle, but from the water's effects. Wind swept into their small cavern, whipping Shivuki's hair into a maelstrom. He took no notice. After we lost so many, the hero's water has been hidden away. To keep it out of people's hands. To keep it safe from people like Suien, Sakura added quietly. Shivuki nodded, swallowing thickly. When he spoke again the words sounded strangled, tears rolling silently down his face. Some years ago we were attacked by shinobi from a distant land. As leader of the village my father did what he felt he had to do to defend us. He drank the water. My, Shivuki stopped to let out a sob, wiping his eyes on his forearm. But my father was not a young man, he continued, bravely forging on with the story despite how much it hurt to recall. The increase in his chakra was too great. My father was a fool. One who performed his sacred duty. Hailed as great leader all because he drank the hero's water and died. Shivuki, Suien called smugly. You wouldn't be foolish enough to pour it out. Know why? If someone attacks the village again you would all be powerless without the hero's water. Shivuki flinched with every word, as though trapped in a vicious storm. Hailstones striking his shaking frame no matter which way he tried to run. Panicked, rapid breaths filled the small space. Naruto and Sakura sitting quietly, unable to intervene in such private political matters. I know I'm the leader of the village and I must guard the water at all costs. But if I let them take it I will have doomed the village and betrayed my people's trust. Time's running out, Shivuki, Suien shouted, an edge of anger creeping into his voice. There's a limit to how long you can hide away. Give me the water or I'll start killing your villagers one by one. Shit Demu Kakashi-sensei. Of course you would leave the one time it's serious. And they won't be quick deaths, Suien announced gleefully. No, your people will feel every ounce of pain I can offer. Don't do it, Lord Shivuki, a child's voice called out. The little girl from earlier. Don't give them the hero's water. The boy. Quiet you brats, a rogue nin shouted, striking them across the face with a whip made of water. The harsh crack ringing across the clearing. Sakura clenched her teeth as he continued, striking the kids over and over. What a bastard. Do something, Naruto snapped, looking just as frustrated as her. I can't stand this. One hand rested on the wall beside the opening, as though he wanted nothing more than to leap down and intervene. Naruto looked back at Shivuki. You may not believe in yourself, Shivuki, but they do. They talk about you like you're a hero. That's because they're only children and they have it stuck in their heads that the village leader has to be a hero. Shivuki snapped, face falling onto his knees. I am not my father, he said softly, brokenly, all I did was inherit his title. Didn't I tell you, Sakura? Kawa asked as they watched the leader of Takigakuer collapse into a sobbing mess, clutching the water to his chest as though it held all the answers. Rivers of snot and tears streaming down his face. Fear scent so strong it was all but palpable. That bloodlines do not make a shinobi? My patience is not without limits. I'm allowing one more minute, Suien called from below. Sakura rushed to the opening in time to see the glint of Suyen's kunao as he held it to the throat of a little girl, her tiny form struggling weakly in his grasp. If you don't come out by then I'll start killing the children one by one. Starting with her. I don't know exactly what happened, Naruto started, his voice rough with hidden emotion. But it sounds to me like your father I was a pretty great man. 40 seconds. Suien averred. Who are you? Shivuki retorted angrily, holding the water as one would a child as he glared at Naruto. You don't know anything about my father. 20 seconds. Naruto tensed. I know he was willing to sacrifice his life to save his village. That's not something an ordinary man would do. Oh, Naruto. Sakura thought sadly. Isn't that why your parents left this world? Why they left you all alone? And never once have you resented them for it? Naruto tightened his headband. The symbol of the leaf product blazing on his forehead. Sakura often marveled at the fierce loyalty he had to Konoha. A place that had treated him like dirt from the moment he was born. If it were me, I would have been poisoned by hatred long ago. What are you gonna do? Shibuki asked. Sakura startled out of her own thoughts in time to see Naruto grin at them both. You two stay here, I've got this covered. Tabeo. He gave 2 thumbs up before backflipping out of the refuge. So fast Sakura didn't have time to protest. Cha. What is it with these two? I'm not some helpless girl, so let me help for fuck's sake. Stay here, she growled at Shibuki. The man shrinking away from her in terror. No doubt Sakura looked as furious as she felt. That idiot is going to get himself, and possibly the rest of us, killed. 3, 2, 1. Sakura froze on the precipice of the wood. Looking down at Suien in horror as he held the knife to the girl's throat. Muscles flexing in his forearm as he made to slash it. The child let out soft cries. All the earlier fight drained out of her as she was faced suddenly, inescapably, with certain death. Hey! At the unknown voice, Suien hesitated. The knife retracting slightly as his attention turned to Naruto. The Uzumaki standing proudly on one of the enormous branches of Takigakure's great tree. His signature orange jumpsuit stuck out like, well, an orange ninja atop a green tree. Sakura allowed herself to feel a moment of relief for the little girl before she moved. Slipping from the tree as quickly and silently as possible. Wincing as small chips of bark flaked off. Thankfully too small to be noticeable. Using chakra to stick to the trunk, Sakura set off at a sprint. All her senses remaining on high alert. Although she was relatively high up, it would take only a single glance for her cover to be blown. Wind whipping hair into her eyes. Bringing with it the scent of suffering. In the clearing below the torii gate blazed red. Sakura fervently hoped she would see nothing else stained crimson. The vast canopy above left patches of shadow across the gnarled roots that lay atop one another like a nest of pythons. Sakura kept to the dark as much as possible. Taking advantage of the landscape as she ran to Naruto's side. Running over and under branches that rose like small hills in front of her. Thankfully, Naruto was doing a good job of keeping the nin below her distracted. Shouting orders and insults at Suien with his usual oblivious attitude. Sakura was panting slightly as she switched from running horizontal to vertically up the trunk. The change in direction placing greater strain on her body as it strove to remain upright. Core clenching and leg muscles aching as they contracted and relaxed. Keeping a steady, upwards pace. Sakura leapt onto the branch with a flourish. Landing in a silent crouch. Too late. Naruto Uzumaki is here. Naruto proclaimed with a grin. Grabbing a nearby vane and leaping into the air with a war cry. Sakura running to the place he had vacated a second too slow. The vine swung out in an enormous arc. Naruto clinging to it like a small orange flower. Get ready for my secret technique dash, the wooden fibers broke with a snap. The blonde's victory cry morphing into one of surprise. He fell into the lake below with a sizable splash. Water erupting upwards only to fall back in drops onto his spluttering face. Sakura face-palmed. What an idiot. Suien laughed. I asked for the hero's water and instead I get a runt with delusions of grandeur. Lifting the girl by her hair with one hand, Suien ignored her shrill cries of pain. I think it's time that I showed you I'm serious. The kunai flashed in the sunlight like the glint of a predator's eye. Lunging down with a speed Sakura couldn't help to outrun. She could only watch in mute horror as it arrowed towards the girl. Suien really was going to kill her. Sakura tensed her legs, readying to spring down to do something, anything, even if it was hopeless she couldn't just. And suddenly Naruto was there. A vibrant blur of orange moving faster than she thought he was capable of. His shoulder slamming into Suien. Arms wrapping around the child as he knocked her out of the way. But he couldn't stop the weapon as it stabbed into his back. Sakura's scream was thankfully lost in the exclamations of the villagers. Blood burst from Naruto's wound in a violent imitation of the splash from earlier. The momentum from the jump carried him forward until he skidded to a stop on the dirt. Face down and unmoving. "Boy, you just don't learn, do you?" a rogue nin chuckled as he sauntered forward. Malicious intent written into every slender line of his body. A gloved hand reached for Naruto's motionless form. And Sakura moved. "Don't touch him." For all the effort it had taken her to climb the tree, it was the work of a moment to make it down. Letting go of the vine she had grabbed just as it reached the furthest point. Somersaulting down to land neatly on her feet. Body planted protectively over Naruto. Sakura bared her teeth at the ninja. "Back off." The nin laughed. "Why don't you attack me, girl, and we'll see how tough you really are." Sakura shifted into an offensive stance but did not move, unwilling to leave Naruto open to attack. "Enough, Kiri-same," Suien shouted. She resisted the urge to look towards him. Instead remaining entirely focused on the enemy in front. "This is only wasting our time. See me, girl, I'm not done with you yet." A child's cry of fear had Sakura instinctively looking over. Watching as Suien raised the kunai once more. Sakura flicked her wrist, watching almost lazily as it knocked the weapon from his hand. It's quite cowardly of a jounin to resort to killing little girls in order to win his battles, don't you think? Suien glared at her. "This has nothing to do with you." Kiri-same dash, the man straightened at the sound of his name dash, "Kill her." Manic laughter racked his slender frame. Messy brown hair pushed from his eyes, the pupils small dots in a sea of white. "Gladly." A whip of water crashed down where Sakura had stood a moment earlier. Naruto draped over her back, she supported his weight with one arm, the other readied to strike. "Is that the best you've got?" Sakura taunted. It was vital the rogue nin were focused on her, Suien especially. The longer she had to come up with a plan, any plan, the better. There were lives depending on her. Sakura threw shuriken in quick succession, cataloging each of Kiri-same's movements as he dodged. Searching for a weak point, an old injury, a slight break in the flow of movement. Any crack in his defense which she could hammer away at until it became big enough to shatter him entirely. Noticing the Kiri-same's tendency to favor his left, Sakura unleashed a volley of weaponry aimed at his right. Senbon, shuriken, and kunai thrown simultaneously. Each needing a completely different technique to block effectively, thus consuming the enemy and giving her time to retreat. Not wasting a moment, Sakura set off at a dead sprint. Naruto a dead weight on her back as she headed towards the empty village. Thankfully none of the other nin made to chase her. Obeying Kiri-same as he ordered them to stay. "That bitch is mine to kill," he snarled. Sakura looked over her shoulder in time to see him clutch at his arm. Red streaming from between his fingers. She had hit him. Good. Sa-ku-ra, Naruto groaned as she placed him carefully inside one of the houses. "It's alright, Naruto." She wanted to say more, yet the sound of rushing footsteps cut her short. "Stay safe," Sakura asked instead, offering a reassuring smile before leaping away. Sliding the door shut behind her. Hopefully Naruto would do as she'd instructed. The house she had placed him in far enough away from Suien and the rest. Sakura's legs kicked up dust as she ran down the streets, putting as large a distance as possible between Kiri-same and her teammates. Considering Naruto wasn't a target, it was unlikely they would bother to hunt him down. The treasure of Takigaku were far more important. A kunai whistled past her ear and Sakura swore, ducking to the side as it thunked into the side of a building. Thrown with so much force it sank up to the hilt. Had that hit, my brain would be splattered from here to Konoha. "Come out, little ninja." Kiri-same's voice echoed between the buildings, bouncing from wall to wall until Sakura could not hope to pinpoint its origin. Helplessly, she froze to the spot, twisting wildly in every direction. Where was he? Where is he? I can't tell. I'll even kill you quickly. Nothing but empty street to her left. Gently. Nothing to the right. It'll be so fast you won't even dash. Sakura looked directly behind her. Kiri-same's face was inches from hers. Sakura's terrified reflection mirrored in beetle black eyes. He smiled. Blink. Metal aimed towards her gut and Sakura countered it with her own. Wincing as steel scraped angrily. Sparks flashing as the two weapons clashed. A fist sank into her gut and Sakura gasped. Doubling over as the air left her lungs. Not so tough now, eh? His arm rose and Sakura moved on instinct. Throwing herself to the side. A kunai sliced a deep cut along her bicep. Carving flesh as easily as butter. Clasping a hand to the wound, Sakura grimaced. She retreated several steps backward. Gaze flicking up and down streets. Fighting down panic as it quickly became clear she was severely outranked. A jounin with intent to kill against a pink-haired genin. She could almost hear Mabuki's smug "I told you so." The pressure around her lungs lessened slightly and Sakura inhaled. Surroundings. She had to change the surroundings. Here the space was enclosed. Buildings casting shadows onto the streets below. Walls and dead-end alleys closing in on every side. Sakura's blood dripped into the ground below. Clotting with dust until crimson faded to red mud. Sakura spat onto the dirt at his feet. "Why don't you come kill me then?" Sakura focused her chakra. Digging into skills honed with Anko. Practice sessions during which she repeated the same skill over and over. The purple-eyed jounin demanding nothing short of perfection. Here, in a real life or death scenario is when it would truly count. Sakura could do this. She had to. Genjutsu, Sly Mind Effect Technique. Her red-tinged chakra arrowed towards Kiri-same. Wrapping itself gently around his mind like bandages to a wound. Soft pulses or energy mixing into his body to weave a singular desire. The moment her instructions finished, Sakura broke the chakra thread connecting her. Confident in the genjutsu she had cast. Or relatively, at least. Kiri-same's eyes had glazed over slightly. Movements faltering. Sakura leapt onto a nearby roof. Wind ruffling her hair as she took off at a sprint. Leaping from rooftop to rooftop. The glittering surface of the lake beckoning. Suzuki and Deer-san lay just to the right. Sakura prayed they were still okay. That Naruto decided to do the smart thing for once and stay put. Sly Mind Genjutsu was beautiful in its simplicity. So simple, in fact, that it rarely occurred to anyone they were under a genjutsu at all. Victims believed they were walking in straight ahead, when in fact they traveled only in circles. Even seasoned ninja were not immune. Sakura jumped from the rooftop to land in a crouch atop the lake. Wincing in pain as her arm throbbed. Blood trickling sluggishly down her skin. "Lord Shivuki!" A villager cried out in panic. Sakura swore. What has that idiot done? Sakura stepped off the water and back onto the shore. None of the Roguenin paid her any attention. Entirely focused on the unfolding scene. Shivuki lay prone. A growing red stain spread from his stomach. Every bit of visible skin bruises or scratched. His eyes were closed and his hair hung lank. Falling listlessly back from his face. Sakura would have thought him dead were it not for the shallow rise and fall of Shivuki's chest. Above him stood Suien. "You never did show much ability," he went on conversationally. Placing a foot atop Shivuki's wound and pressing down hard. No response. "You were weak then, and you're weak now." Suien reached a hand into Shivuki's outer garment. Pulling out something that sparkled glistened in the sun. Something made of glass. "Fuck. That's the hero's water." Give it back." Shivuki reached weakly towards it. Grasping blindly like a newborn child. Suien crushed a foot against the open wound. Grinding it into the skin hard enough to make Takigakure's leader scream. Falling back into unconsciousness shortly after. Suien uncapped the bottle. Staring down at the contents as though the water held the answer to life itself. "The world is mine for the taking," he laughs at the thought, raising the bottle to his lips and drinking deeply. Sakura's eyes widened as his chakra exploded. A candle flame to an inferno. Just like that. "You should feel honored, Shivuki," Suien spoke as though the unconscious man could still hear him. "Your people shall be the first to witness my power." "Do you ever shut up?" a new voice demanded. "Naruto." Sakura looked past Suien, watching the battered, bloody form of Naruto stagger to his feet. standing his ground against the onslaught of raw chakra. How dare you treat Shivuki this way? How dare you call him weak? I'm gonna make you eat those words. Suien laughed. Is that so? Sakura didn't wait for Naruto to unleash his typical shadow clones. Nor did she wait for Suien to make the first move. Suten, Shugaiden. Spheres of water rose from the lake to hurtle towards the enemy. The majority targeting Suien. Though dozens more broke away to strike without warning at the rogue shinobi. Some dodged in time. Others did not. Suien deflected them with relative ease. Punching the jutsu with chakra enchanted fists to send water exploding in all directions. Shadow Clone Jutsu. 5 clones of Naruto attacked Suien with a war cry. Only to be blown backwards by chakra. Backwards. Puffing out of existence between one breath and the next. If only Naruto could camouflage them, those clones would make the perfect hidden weapon. Hidden weapon. The idea struck like lightning. It doesn't matter how many times you clone yourself. 5 times 0 is still 0. A nasty hit sent Naruto flying backwards. Slamming into the great tree hard enough to leave an indent behind. Suten, Shugaiden. Water shot towards the Jounin and he laughed. Deflecting the first few single-handedly. You should know that's not going to work on me. A smirk tugged at her mouth. Isn't it? The next spheres rotated so fast Sakura almost couldn't keep them on target. Chakra guiding them forwards with furious focus. She would not fail this. Suien's body twisted. Arm extending to punch the latest assault. Enhanced chakra glowing around his frame. His fist hit the water straight on, and like all the others it exploded. Only this time Suien screamed. Clutching his hand with a mixture of shock and pain. Half a senbon embedded into the skin. And more kept coming. The Jounin was forced to retreat against Sakura's assault. Unable to counter-attack the churning orbs of water and simultaneously unable to escape. He dodged one only to be hit by another. Only sheer skill keeping him from being torn to pieces. Even so, shallow cuts opened up across his body from where the senbon had struck. Suien flung through a series of hand signals before his body flickered. You little bitch, his voice snarled right beside Sakura's ear. A hand closed around her injured arm and Sakura screamed at the white-hot pain even as she was thrown like a rag doll through the air. Up and down, twisting inside her head. Everything turning into bright, distant colors before she hit the lake with a splash. Briefly stunned, Sakura could do nothing as she drifted downwards. The world above slowly fading from view. Survival instincts kicked in as she felt her chest constrict. An instinctive desperation taking over as she fought the urge to breath. Kicking for the surface, Sakura fought rising panic. Each stroke of her limbs fueling the sense of urgency that she had to get to the surface, had to breathe. Breaking through the water surface, Sakura sucked in air hungry. Dripping hair sticking to her skin as she tread water. Blinking her eyes clear of liquid and gazing towards the shoreline. Where did she go? Suien muttered to himself. Scanning waves of the lake in search or a hint of link. Standing atop the branch of the vast tree, he gloried in the simple thrill of it. Power rushing through his veins unmatched by any in Takigaku, most likely the world. Don't worry about her. A voice broke apart his train of thought and Suien growled in irritation. Looking over just in time to see the black-haired boy from earlier. Midair, he threw the enormous shuriken from earlier. The blades spinning so fast it resembled a grey disk as it barreled towards Suien. He ducked to the side, narrowly avoiding being sliced in two. What was that? Leaves above his head rustled and the Jounin raised his head in time to see Naruto. Face set with determination and fist outstretched. It collided with his jaw in a burst of pain, the sheer power behind the punch knocking him clean off the tree. The Jounin plummeted into the water below, where Sakura was waiting. Snake, ram, horse, hare, ram, horse, hare. Water prison jutsu. A large orb of water rose sluggishly from the lake. Suien's body twisting inside it as he fought to escape. Gritting her teeth against the force of his chakra, the muscles along Sakura's arm rippled as she braced a palm against the curved edge. This close, she could see the rogue nin's soundless screams as he fought to escape her jutsu. A jutsu that Anko had left pinned to her door alongside her goodbye note. A silent question. A challenge. It had taken hours to perfect. Hours of scouring books on Kiri lore for references to its use. Of straining her memory back to so long ago. Remembering the hand signs as Zabuza flashed through them. Of fighting with the desire to ask Kakashi and the childish spite of wanting to learn it herself. Sakura didn't think he would listen. And so she taught herself. And now, her enemy trapped within the prison of Sakura's own making, it had all been worth it. Suien's struggles were growing weaker and Sakura's mouth curled in triumph. Staring at Suien in malicious delight. Before an enormous explosion of chakra sent her rocketing backwards. Breaking the jutsu as easily as popping a bubble. Whoa, he's fast. Naruto right before Suien sent him flying with a roundhouse kick. I'll just kill you all. He screamed. Sounding, and looking, a tad unhinged as he stood dripping wet on the branch. Sakura ran as fast as possible towards him, frowning as she drew closer. Was that incredible chakra fading? Phoenix Flower Jutsu. The enormous fireball erupting from Sasuke's mouth diverged into hundreds of smaller flames. All headed towards Suien. The Jounin raised his arms, an enormous wall of water rising from the lake. The fireballs collided with a hiss of steam. Evaporating on impact. The moment the wall collapsed back into liquid, Sakura threw her kunao. Suien blocked them all. Whirling around just in time to kick away Sasuke's shuriken. Young pups, I wouldn't be so confident if I were you, he leered at them both. The hero's water sill clutched firmly in one hand. A pulse of frustration ran through her at the sight. He was fighting off all three of them, one-handed? All the while holding the treasure of Takigakuer. One Shibuki had risked his life to protect. Her jaw clenched. Canines lengthening into fangs. Looks like you're the one overestimating yourself, Sasuke called. Sakura ran in an arc around Suien, the Jounin taking no notice of her movements. And why should he? All her weapons were gone and one arm was limp at her side. The muscles torn down to bone. Despite the pain and the bleak outlook, Sakura placed herself proudly by Sasuke's side. Shoulders tilted back and head held high. Naruto jumped down to land on Sasuke's right. Together the three of them faced the Jounin. We all know that drinking the hero's water makes a person stronger, Sasuke continued. He did not acknowledge either companion, aside from a slight tilt of his head. Even so, Sakura could tell the Uchiha was not displeased. Drinking the hero's water isn't the same as real strength, Tabeo. Just look at you, Sakura drawled, enjoying the moment. Suien's eyes widened as he finally registered it was 3-on-1. You're already out of breath. Sakura cracked her knuckles. And we're just warming up. Shut up. Suien yelled. Launching himself at terrifying speed towards Sasuke. Sakura and Naruto both thrown backwards from the force of the impact as he hit the Uchiha dead on. Sasuke colliding with the tree over a kilometer in the distance. Sakura skidded like a stone across the lake. Bouncing off the water and onto the rocky ground. Skin shredding beneath dirt before she finally stopped. Hastily wiping the dirt from her eyes and mouth, Sakura staggered to her feet. Her vision blurring even as she fought to clear it. Clothes ripped in several places and large patches of her body stinging as though she'd poured bleach over infected wounds. What do you think of me now? Suien shouted from his place atop the lake. Sakura could only watch, one hand braced against the stone as he uncapped the bottle. And drank. By now 2/3 of it were gone. Suien's power increasing impossibly with every drop. I think you're pathetic, came Naruto's roughened voice. A pile of rocks a short distance from Sakura clattering as he emerged. Blonde hair caked with dust and a nasty slice above his eye. You called Shibuki weak, and a coward. The man's prone form still lay where it had fallen. Shirt discolored by blood. Even though he knew he wasn't strong. Shibuki stayed and fought for his village. That's what real courage is. The power of Naruto's chakra began to grow. Sakura watching her friend in awe as it built and built. A steady, warm fireplace gaining intensity. Fed by wholehearted desire and a need to protect. A fierce orange in color, it writhed around his form. You abandoned and betrayed your village. Your courage comes from a jug of water and you think I'm scared of you. The raw power his chakra held was incredible in its intensity. I'll show you how scared I am. Naruto screamed the words like a challenge, launching into a run. The speed of movement leaving waves crashing in his wake as Naruto sped across the water surface. His fist collided with Suien's. The two chakra natures pale blue and fire orange meeting like night and day. Sasuke caught Sakura's eye as Suien was thrown backwards. Now. Fire style, Dragon Flame Jutsu. Water style, Water Fang Bullet. The dragon made of pure flame stretched its jaw open, readying to swallow Suien whole. The Jounin changed his direction midair, veering to the left in a desperate attempt to escape. Right where Sakura wanted him. A boulder-sized orb of water struck him in the gut. Suien's gasp of pain morphing into a scream as Sasuke's jutsu began to scorch his body. No! Suien cried out in dismay as flames reached his arms. Sakura running towards the carnage caught a final glimpse glass. Right before the hero's water shattered. Without the source of his power, Suien was forced on the defensive, leaping into the air in a bid to escape the genin below. Go Naruto! Sasuke shouted as Naruto followed Suien into the sky. Take him out. Don't let him escape. Sakura added. Like I need you guys to tell me that. Naruto's hands formed a familiar sign. Shadow Clone Jutsu. Side by side, Sasuke and Sakura could only watch as dozens of orange figures filled the sky, all arrowing towards a single point. Identical battle cries screamed from countless throats. If that's how you wish to die, so be it. Suien changed his trajectory, chakra whirling as he plummeted down to meet the clones. They clashed in an explosion of color. Blue and orange battling for dominance even as Suien quickly disappeared beneath a barrage of fists. Aside from the occasional glimpse of gray, he was otherwise invisible. Nothing was clear, except that Suien was losing badly. Naruto's shadow clones puffed out of existence one by one until only the original remained, arm cocking backwards for one final punch. Suien's battered body unable to avoid what was coming. Game over. The words were lined with victory as his fist collided with Suien's jaw. Sakura watching with no small amount of satisfaction as he flew out of sight. The force of the punch sending the man out of Takigakure entirely. Suien had been a dead man walking from the moment that water touched his lips. Sakura felt no remorse at the knowledge Naruto's punch was the killing blow. Let all Roguenin die for their crimes. It's all they deserve. Sakura ran over as Naruto landed, panting, on the shoreline. His body shaking with fatigue as that incredible chakra dissipated. Through a face covered in blood, sweat, and dirt, Sakura grinned. Naruto looked just as bad as she felt. Nicely done, Sasuke said, sauntering over to them with a smirk. The three battered genin stood on shaking legs, bruised, bloodied, and scraped. Sakura held out a fist, Naruto and Sasuke mirroring the gesture. Go Team 7! Sakura cheered as they fist bumped. She had never felt so happy. Check the description for the links to the author.